We are recording.
Thank you. And whenever you are ready, Mr. Chair.
Okay, I was kind of waiting to see if any members of the public would populate. Oh, we do. There's quite a number. All right, well, yeah, we'll go ahead and get started. So, well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the December 9th, 2020 BAR Large Virtual Meeting. This is the last meeting of 2020. May be the last thing of many 2020 events. But my name is Jay White. The other board members that are present here this afternoon are James Metters, Leon Scott, and Luda Subchuck. City staff present this evening are Lawrence Courtney, Linda Bennett, and Alex Howell. And before I go too much farther, I'd like to acknowledge Alex, who is leaving the city for a job up around Maryland Way. So we appreciate the service that you've provided to the city. I hope you found it fulfilling as a career step, and we look forward to hearing of your continued success. So let me go through the order of the meeting, which will be familiar to many of you. First will be an introduction and overview by city staff to the board and to the public. And then the applicant will make a presentation.
Best of luck, Alex. It's wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the applicant presentation is really slated for about 10 minutes. If you need more than that, then please request that of me before you begin your presentation. Make sure also that as you address the board and the public, clearly state your name for the record. And any persons affiliated with the project, whether they be an owner, developer, designer, consultant, please speak during this portion of the proceedings rather than during public comment. That will be followed by an equivalent amount of time for public comment, and during which the applicant won't have an opportunity to respond. And again, please clearly state your name for the record. This will be followed by city staff comments and recommendation, and then an opportunity of about 5 minutes or so for an applicant response or clarification to either public comment or the city staff comments and recommendations. This will be followed by a board discussion and vote, and this will close any period for the applicant to converse with the board. None of our three items tonight have been withdrawn or deferred. And please keep in mind that the jurisdiction of this board is architecture only. So any comments that might be related to zoning or lot coverage, livability, trash, noise, traffic aren't the purview of this board, and we can't really take any action upon those. All right, Mr. Courtney, why don't we go over a few house rules real quick? I won't read all of this because it tells you how to get here. If you're already here, then congratulations. But I do want to outline that public comment in the era of Zoom is structured according to what you see on the screen, where you would need to provide those comments or request an opportunity to address the board in advance. And there's a form on the city website, or you could send an email to boards@charlestonsc.gov and take care of that. Unfortunately, at this stage of the proceedings, we can't add any new public commenters to the agenda. So, all right, Mr. Courtney. All right, staff meeting protocol. So staff is controlling the slideshow that you see here. Just ask staff to advance the slides as necessary. All of us, whenever we speak, we do need to give our names just for clarity of record. And then for attendees, your video and microphones have been disabled until you're promoted to presenter by either Alex or Linda Bennett. The chat and QA functions have been disabled for security purposes. Public comment, applicants and all team members in the public have been required to register, like I mentioned earlier, indicate which project they wish to speak on, and submit any documents in advance of the meeting. And just as it would be in an in-person meeting, all applications heard today are part of the public meeting format. If you've registered and will speak during the public comment portion of the meeting, you will need to state your name and address for the record. Those members of the public that have registered will be called in order by project. So do keep an ear out for your name to be called. Members of the public that speak are encouraged to remain in the meeting for the completion of the item you've commented on. You never know what's going to happen. And then staff will call on registered members of the public to speak for each project, but unregistered members of the public, as I alluded to earlier, who raise their hands won't be called on. You have to be registered. All right, next. Board members will be polled by the chair for comments and for their vote on a motion. Each member, when voting, should respond yay in favor or nay not in favor. The chairman will reread the motion verbatim, and the board member making the motion should correct the chair if they've not reread the motion accurately. If a board member needs to recuse, they will be temporarily removed from the meeting and placed back in the meeting at the start of the next agenda item. If the board needs to go into executive session, which we don't anticipate, we'll call into a separate conference line, and all video and audio on Zoom will be temporarily disabled until we return to the regular meeting. Staff will have meeting results, including staff comments and board motion, to the applicant following the meeting, and the results will also be posted on the city website. And lastly, and not least, this is all being recorded. All right. Let's take off.
And thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. The first item on the agenda is 98 Wentworth Street. This is a request for preliminary approval for new construction of a two-story addition to an existing church complex, which includes the Grace Cathedral, which is a one structure in Charleston Village in the Old and Historic District. Some context photos. This area shows Wentworth on the south, Glebe Street on the east. We have coming on the west. This is the site of the new addition, the cathedral on the right here. This has been approved for demolition by the board previously. Larger view of the site here. Looking east on Wentworth, looking west on Wentworth. This is the site right here. And previous staff comments. Well, the previous motion was conceptual approval with board and staff comments. That was on September 9th of 2020. Previous board comments, which I will paraphrase a little bit here, was that one board member appreciated the attention to detail and how the applicant has adapted the design to show these details by using technologies and models to address many of his concerns. He has visited the site and looked at those view corridors and walked Wentworth Street and thought at that time that the modifications that had been made have significantly improved the project. The church is still substantially visible to the public and can be appreciated by all, even though the applicant is adding this addition on the west side. Another board member indicated that they had missed the first meeting, but that they see the improvements in comparison to the first rendition, and they would like to see more glazing and the structural lighter. But at the same time, Hanahan Hall, which is on the east of the cathedral, is fairly heavy and solid, so that they balance each other out, and that they were in support of staff comments and recommendations. Um, Previous staff comments include generally, as previously noted, the project is well conceived as a bookend to Hanahan Hall to the east in the overall cathedral complex, and is largely deferential to the cathedral in terms of massing and the articulation of architectural elements. Staff comments at that time were in response to staff and board concerns regarding height. Applicant has reduced the height of the building by 1 foot 7 inches to address staff concerns about the proximity of the addition to the northwest portion of the cathedral. This area has been shifted to the west to a minimum closeness of 10 feet to the outside face of a cathedral buttress. The elaborate metal cornice at the setback and lowered portion of the addition to the east has been simplified, but could be made more similar to that of the addition main body. Reference sheet A201. The addition has been shifted to the west as far as possible, and the east wall of the lowered portion of the addition to the east has been moved west 4 feet, increasing the courtyard width. As may be seen on the 1944 Sanborn map on sheet A001, as well as on historic photographs, the cathedral has been much more constricted in the past than in the current plan, than what the current plan proposes. As shown on renderings and on sheet 2006A, 206A, sight lines from the east and west are remarkably equal and open on each side of the cathedral along Wentworth. Our recommendation at that time was for conceptual approval with board and staff comments. And with that, we'll get on with applicant's presentation. Mr. Young.
Okay, thank you. Hello, I'm Simmons Young, and I'm here tonight on behalf of Grace Church Cathedral. Mr. Chair, I think I'm going to be right at that border between 10 and 15. I'm going to push as fast as I can.
Okay.
I had a statement from the People's Warden in the age of Zoom. We had a miscommunication, but some of it is that the vestry rector and dean and the two wardens are watching, and they wanted to express their enthusiasm for the architecture of the project and the board's particular attention to the cathedral. So with that, I'll go ahead and start. It's an honor to be presenting to you this addition to Grace. It's a growing, welcoming, and vibrant congregation with its wonderful 1846 E.B. White Church. Congregation that wants to stay downtown, and it's made this decision twice. Once in 1960, when over 1,000 members decided to build the Johnson Building, which we'll see on the east side of the campus. As city architect recognized, we're going through the TRC review in parallel with this, and I can talk more about that if there's particular questions from the board. Board comments. From last time, we do feel that the idea that this new addition is kind of matching the massing and the heaviness of Johnson Hall. That's what we're going for from the street. So we think that lower height roof is a good idea, and we'll look at that, but we haven't changed it. And then from the staff comments, we'll look at the cornice and what the design intent is and what we're doing there. I'm going to fly through some of these first slides. Sheet A100, and congratulations, Alex. I'm sorry to see you. Congratulations. Sheet A100, A001, I'm sorry, which is just historic photos and Sanborn map. Can we go back to 001?
Oh, I'm sorry.
There we go. Okay. That's that. If we need to refer to it, the next one is sheet 2, which is sheet A002, the context mapping. And next slide. These are photos. I think you're all familiar with the site, so we'll skip it. Sheet 4, that's the evolution since 2000. Sheet 5, we can skip to the next. Sorry, that's the diagram that shows the new building and its relation to the campus, its massing, and how it completes the composition of the buildings. On sheet A100, the site plan shows similar stuff. You can see Croft Hall is the dashed line there in the middle of the Cathedral Hall. That's what's being demolished. Parking on the left, parking also on the northeast side of the campus and upper right there. Yeah, and then the playground for Grace Little School, which is housed in the older part of the building, and also for the Sunday school. Sheet A100A, the landscape plan, shows the courtyard hardscape design. We do have a landscape architect with us tonight, I believe, if you all have any questions. The ideas that we want to show here that you haven't seen is that we're going to put some trees in front of the new building, similar to what's in front of the Johnson building, probably some crepe myrtles. All right, and a full canopy shade tree will go in the playground. Sheet A101 is the first floor plan, showing the Cathedral Hall with the alignment of the main windows and the columns with the stained glass windows of the cathedral. So we're translating that original design of the cathedral through the Cathedral Hall. The service functions are in the rear. There's a landing out front and an ADA ramp going to the front and the rear. There's a one-story section of the building where the kitchen resides. It's gets shorter as we get closer to the cathedral, and that's generally a strategy is to be more deferential to the cathedral as you get closer to it. Sheet 102 shows offices for the administrators and the clergy. These are moving onto campus with this plan. Currently, they're on another block down the street, so that's a nice thing for the church. Accessible facilities to serve the second floor. There's a clear story space that looks out on the cathedral and speaks to the importance, from the inside of the building too, of picking up the cathedral and really using that as the main feature of the building. Sheet A103. Oh, I'm sorry. On 102, there's one more thing. There was a roof, which we're now turning into a roof deck going off that conference room. And we'll look at that, I think, in elevations and street views. That's in the model. That'll be most useful in a section. Sheet A103. Okay, so there's the mechanical screens. We've pushed them as far away from the street and as close to the center of the building as we can. And there's a simple detail on the upper right-hand side that shows the aluminum mounted on galvanized posts. Sheet A103, I'm sorry, sheet A200, yeah, great. The streetscape showing the massing of the building. Sheet 201, A201, I'll slow down a little bit here. So the previous is shown on top and the new on the bottom. The roof terrace is in the background. It's behind the cloister and it's about 120 feet away from the sidewalk. Otherwise, not too much has changed. The mechanical screen, and again, we'll get to the views. Not so visible. Of course, it's visible in a straight line drawing, but it's less visible in perspective. Sheet A202. Not much has changed. We think I'm sorry, is this 202? Are we on 203? Yeah, great, thank you.
Sorry.
Not much has changed. We think we've strategically minimized the effect of the mechanical equipment. We have added 2 louvers in the wall. They're very far back from the street, and they work with the composition of that portion of the building. Some minor changes to some window details. Sheet A203. The section and the east elevation. There is a change to the material, the cornice on the lower roof. It changed to metal. It was previously stucco. We changed it to insulated metal panel like a Lucabond. We propose a matte finish and a color to match the stucco. We're working on how long those sections can be, but at least 8 feet. Try and minimize the joints. In our design intent is to use a lighter material that typically is used to span, something like metal, instead of stucco that's more associated with masonry. And this is this whole portion of the building is its own individual design element. It's a double height space, so we're trying to make it, we are not trying to make it like the main building. It evokes the side porch design or piazza design, which has a beam at the top that goes between columns. And it draws on some classical proportions. You can see the roof terrace and the raise in height. We are adding a glass and metal railing and trying to keep the parapet of that roof low for reasons we'll see in a second, mainly just to try and keep it minimally visible. Sheet 204 shows a section through the building and how the building relates to the courtyard and how the volumes of the new space work. The roof terrace in the distance can be seen in the distance with the low parapet wall and that glass and metal railing I was talking about. Sheet 205 is the north elevation. It's not very visible, and we simplified it. We added some windows in an office and in the testing room. The windows are at the center of the north portion of the addition, still let light into the lobby, which we think is the really important thing. The elevator lobby. On sheet A206, showing how the volumes of the space work. You can see we have a large space on the first floor, and we're trying to keep the proportions right with the ceiling heights while still keeping the building as short as we can. And then this shows the relationship to the ground plane, and something which I want to ask for tonight for the board to consider that's not on these drawings. I'll outline it a little bit here. We're requesting to lift the entire building an additional 5 inches from what we're showing. And there's 4 reasons for this. We are showing a 11.59 elevation of the first floor slab. We'd like you to consider 12 feet. There's a relatively new city stormwater regulation that requires the 3,500 cubic feet storm water storage, which would all go under the slab. There's very limited places to put it on this building. Can't put it close to the church. Can't put it in the College of Charleston's underground stuff that's under the parking. There is, can't put it in front of the building, the parking lot, too far away in the back. And it's got to get water from this building. So anyway, that's what that amounts to is a 40-foot long by 3-foot tall by 15-foot wide cistern, and actually 2 of those. So they're big. And they've got a drain into the thing. So that's issue 1 is stormwater. We are moving from an AE 13 to an AE 10. That's good. There's a new city requirement that goes to a +2. Finally, our original survey was based on a 1920s benchmark. That all changed in the 1980s. We thought we were matching the Johnson building at 11.7. Sorry, at 12.7. That's now 11.7. It's all a long and complicated way to ask for 5 inches. Typical wall sections on sheet 301. So this is the good stuff. They're in plan sections in sheet 302. We can just move through these relatively quickly. Coping details in the wall sections through the windows. Sheet 303, the wall section near the front of the building. we on 303? This is where the stair door is on the side, the sprinkler room door and the stair door. Sheet 304 is a section through the front entry. You can see some of the cast stone items that we're using that are also on Johnson Hall. And sheet 305 shows the whole section through the low roof curtain wall space. It's a 2-foot base, a 23-foot high section of glass and column in different places. A 3-foot overall cornice height. In other words, it's a base that's roughly 1/10 the height and a cornice that's roughly 1/7 the height of the column. And that 1-to-7 relationship turns up a lot in classical proportions. And that's why we're setting our cornices and stuff the way they are, and tablatures and all that. Sheet A1, I think the rest of this stuff is going to be real quick. These are just details that we're going to try and match. They're throughout the campus, the lights and rails, and you'll start to see those show up on the final drawing on the next set. Sheet A2, these are views that we talked about a lot previously. Sheets 2, 3, and 4 are all about how much of the cathedral you can really see, although they do good renderings of the building itself. Okay, and then I'm going to switch to this model and then I'll stop talking. Okay, so bear with me while I take this model around. Okay, so that's just sort of the overall, view of the thing. This is the Glenn McConnell dorm. I've already gone ahead and removed that. The way my camera works, we're about, in my estimate, 16 feet off the ground here at the sidewalk, and if I move back off the model, that puts us closer to like 6 to 8 feet. So anyway, the main thing that I want to use this for, and we can use also the sections on sheets 204, maybe 203 or 204 to look at this. Get those up on the screen, and then this back roof. Actually, it's one more. Can we go one more forward? Yeah, there we go. So you can see that the upper rail and the eave of the lower side aisle of the church are relatively close to each other. So where you can see the roof of the church, that's when you see the rail. I've lost my camera somehow. But can you all see? Can't see what I'm showing you. There we go. Okay, so back here, this is that roof deck. This is it from the street. You might see a little bit of that. And that's where it is. And then the other thing that we added was, you can start to see them appearing up here, these mechanical screens. But we think they're, again, pretty minimally visible. And that's actually sidewalk level. It's not great. I wish we could all stand around this thing, but we can't. With that, I am going to close it and see if there are any questions.
Hey, thank you. Any questions from board or staff? Hearing none, let's proceed to public comment.
Jay,
Alex or
we
Linda?
have,
Oh, yeah,
sorry
go ahead.
about that. Jay, we
Yeah, go
have
ahead.
Erin Minigan, who's going to be
Okay.
speaking first.
Okay.
Thank you. Erin Minigan, Preservation Society of Charleston. The Preservation Society was encouraged by board comments at the previous meeting about the positive impacts more glazing would have on the front of the building, but disappointed it was not incorporated into the motion. We feel this warrants further conversation and again strongly suggest incorporating more glazing and taking a wider approach to the details of the easternmost mass of the addition to offer relief to the primary cathedral building. Specifically, we feel the curtain wall treatment of the center bays is very successful, and pulling this approach around to the front two bays on the east and south facades would benefit the design and reduce the perceived mass from the street. The stucco detailing of the beams and columns could be lightened to further enhance this effect. We also feel the rooftop terrace added to the one-story northwest corner piece is inappropriate. It has gotten much taller, obscures too much of the building, and the top railing is unattractive. This component should revert to the previous, more subtle design. Finally, we feel more information on the mechanical screen requirements should be provided. Since the previous review, substantial screening has been added to the roof, and we are concerned it would be quite visible above the parapet. We would encourage further study of the mechanical unit arrangement and screening configuration to reduce this visibility. Thank you.
Next, Jay, we've got Justin from Historic Charleston.
Good evening. This is Justin Schwebler from the Historic Charleston Foundation. We would like to continue our support for this proposal. The applicants have been very responsive to BAR and HCF comments, and we feel that they have created a complementary and high quality design, and we recommend preliminary approval. Thank you.
Any other public comment? All right, if not, then city
No
staff
written public
comments.
comment.
Okay, great. Any staff recommendations, staff comments?
All right. Comments include that it should be noted that this project has an issue for which it needs to go before BZA SD. This was scheduled to happen last week, but it was deferred due to lack of a quorum. Because of notification and scheduling issues, this meeting cannot occur until January 6, 2001. Department staff is very optimistic that this issue will be successfully resolved at that time, resulting in no change to the design presented here. Otherwise, we wouldn't be wasting your time. The design has changed very little from what was last reviewed by the board. The new details shown are consistent with the proposed design and materials, with only a couple of items to address or restudy as follows. First, the cornice at the lowered eastern portion of the multi-purpose assembly space continues to employ a pronounced cornice, which should be minimized in a similar fashion to the higher overall building parapet. Secondly, the joint at the through-wall flashing at the base of the building, not shown on elevations and elsewhere, needs to be minimized so as to be visually inconspicuous. Staff also recommends that a mock-up be required and reviewed by the board. And with that, staff recommends preliminary approval with board and staff comments, contingent upon resolution of the BZA SD issue, resulting in no design changes from that which is submitted here.
Okay, thank you, sir. Applicant response for clarification.
Yes, there's a couple of things. The Preservation Society mentioned the roof deck. And the building in the distance, I'll just note, is it was built in the late 1980s, and half of it is actually new addition. We don't think this is very visible, and that we think the glass and the metal provide that. Everyone can sort of recognize especially in this day and age, the importance of outdoor space. And we feel like it contributes to sustainable design of the building. As far as mechanical arrangement, yeah, I was just looking at the top of it. It looks like our rooftop units. I know where they come down, and we can see what we can do to try and minimize that. And we're coordinating with our mechanical engineer. We've already pushed him back, and we'll keep pushing on it to see what we can do. Yeah, there was a November 4th site design meeting. Things were deferred for a tree, Class BC tree back by the dumpster on the rear of the property line. City supported it. It was deferred by the board until December 2nd with a request for tree mapping, an arborist review, and a review from the neighbor, the College of Charleston, and more defined hardship. We have all 4 of those, and we still have city support. So we were hoping December 2nd there would be a quorum. But anyway, and then I mentioned that thing already about the cornice and why we're doing the proportions we are. And flashing noted, I agree, we don't want ugly flashing sticking up. And mock-up, I think, is always a good idea. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, so board discussion.
Jay, this is Leon Scott. I have very little, but again, I agree. So little change from the previous presentation. I'm in agreement with staff recommendation.
Okay. Anyone else?
This is Luda Sobchuk. I actually have a quick question. The Elucabon and the glass railings, it seems like they're used in that, I guess, the platform edition. It's a question, but also comment. It seems like those materials are foreign to the rest of the building. What is the reason for Elucabon specifically?
We wanted to have. We started with it as metal cap with stucco, and metal cornice with stucco. And then we changed the stucco to the Elucabon in order to have something that resembled more metal, would be a material that would span between columns rather than stucco, which is more related in my mind to sort of masonry.
Okay. I guess that glazing, glass railing and Elucabon may need to be represented on mock-up so we can understand a little bit better, at least me, how that works.
Simmons, Simmons, this is James. Do you anticipate visible flashing that is not seen currently in the plans?
Well, I'm noting on sheet, after Mr. Courtney's comment, I looked at sheet 301, and we've got through wall flashing at the base. Looks like it's about 4 inches off the base. I think the Masonry Institute allows you to hold it back. So we'll check that. But no, I don't want to have a nasty flap of, metal sticking out of the bottom.
I mean, I don't want you to misunderstand my question. Flashing is critically important, and I understand it. I just, in some projects recently, flashings have exposed themselves in ways that changed what I anticipated the building was going to look like. And you don't have anything that is still in the works, not yet worked out or not yet resolved, that could lead to that situation?
Well, I think a stucco weep screed is something that we're going to be looking at closely. We'll be certainly providing details on all this stuff and glad to incorporate it in the law.
Okay. Any other comments or a motion?
This is Luda again. This 5-inch you mentioned to add to the height of the building. I guess we need to address that. And personally, I don't have any issues with that. So we may need to make sure that it is in motion.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's correct. It should be, and I'm fine with that rather small adjustment to the plan.
Yeah.
So Jay, I'll make a motion for approval,
Okay.
including staff comments and board comments.
Okay.
This is Leon Scott. I will second.
Okay. So that's a motion made and seconded for preliminary approval with board and staff comments. Made by Mr. Metters, seconded by Mr. Scott. Ms. Subtuck, how do you vote?
Yay, in favor.
All right, Mr. Scott.
Yay in favor.
Mr. Metters.
Yay in favor.
The chair votes likewise. The motion carries 4-0.
For your time and consideration.
Okay, item 2 on the agenda are buildings, including 363, 367, and 369 King Street. Applicant is requesting conceptual approval for new construction of a 7-story student housing development behind 3 existing historic structures, requesting 1 additional story for architectural merit and context. Renovation of 3 existing historic structures and the new construction of an addition to the historic structures. These are category 3 and 4 historic structures in no specific neighborhood from circa 1892 and pre-1884 in the Olden Historic District. Some context photos. We see the site here bounded in red with King Street on the east, Calhoun a ways off on the north, St. Philip a ways off on the east, and there's a lot in between here. This is the site looking north on King. And with that, we will turn it over to the applicant for their presentation. Mr. Ramos.
Good evening. My name is Steve Ramos. I'm an architect with LS3P, and I'm presenting on behalf of the owners of the property. I'm really excited to be working on this project. It is a real tour de force in that there is a large amount of retail, there is a large amount of student housing, and there is a total of 4 different buildings that are part of this assembly. 3 of which that you see on the right are historic buildings that I think are going to be exceptional buildings. They have not been maintained very well, but with this project, they will be getting that polish that is much needed. And then there is a new building that is being built behind those, which is building number 4 that you see on this site plan here. Because there are 4 structures, I've got a lot of slides to get through, so like Mr. Young, I will certainly need more than 10 minutes, but I will be swift and concise. Next slide. This is an aerial photograph. You can see King Street in this photograph. Marion Square, just to get you acclimated, is at the right there. And the site is highlighted in red. The historic buildings, of course, front on King Street. There is a red dashed line there that indicates really the extent of the historic pieces of those buildings. And so the new structure is going to occur behind those. And for some of the board members have been out on site. It was only about a month ago where we were approved for demolition of the non-historic structures. So a lot of you are familiar with this site already. Next slide. This is another angle. One of the very unique things about this site is that it is landlocked. The new building that is being built is surrounded on all four sides by existing structures. 3 of the sides are by historic buildings. And then in the foreground there's a newer structure, the Campus Center student apartments, which you see. Next slide. I'm going to start first by focusing on the historic buildings, and then we will move over to the new building. Next slide. Here's a photograph of those existing structures. Next slide. So 363 King, this is really, I would say, the jewel out of the 3 in terms of the architecture, I think is really exceptional. One of the really awesome things that we uncovered with the help of Historic Charleston Foundation's archives was an article that talked about the original building, which was built in 1891. And I've highlighted some of the really interesting details that were noted in this article. It was originally the C.P. Poppenheim hardware store, really nice hardware store. The facade is made out of terracotta and what was referred to as Philadelphia pressed brick. The entrance portal said was supported by wrought pillars set upon Winsboro granite. Currently, those pillars are wood and they're sitting on stucco bases. And so it's our intent to bring back the granite pedestals as well as bring in new pillars. We interpreted that they were potentially cast iron. So that's what we're proposing as part of this design. It said that the vestibule floor was of the same granite as the granite that you see on the piers, and that it was the largest block ever brought to Charleston at 16 square feet. If you look at this photo here, you can see that there are 2 steps that step up into that store. That was added in 1981, so 110 years later, or 120 years later. And we're going to be taking those steps out, and we're going to be exposing what we assume would be a large block of granite. I think it's unlikely that that granite was removed. So we're going to be restoring this building down to grade level so that it's handicap accessible, as well as bringing back that stone vestibule. It said that the entrance was flanked by finely carved woodwork and large plate glass windows. In 1981, the storefront that you see was replaced with ceramic tile, not the nice kind of tile, the kind of tile you might see in a bathroom. So we're going to be taking that tile off and we're going to be replacing it with really nice woodwork. And just some other fun details. It mentioned that there was a railroad track 100 feet in length that ran down the center of the store. I suspect that railroad track is still there as well. I hope it's there. And that the storeroom was 19 feet high. And we're going to be restoring that original height as well. So a significant amount of work is going to go into this building. Next slide. I mentioned in 1981, there was a very unfortunate renovation to the structure where just about everything was demolished with the exception of the facade. So what you're seeing on the left is if you step into the building, you'll see the facade is on the left And there's a new stucco structure that was built in 1981. As you can see in that construction photo there, you can also see that the facade was gutted at the storefront level. So we know that all of that material that's there today was not original. Next slide. So you might wonder, what are you looking at? And I guess for the folks that went out there, you can recognize this, but again, you're seeing that they kept a facade and they slid in a 3-story building behind a facade that was really designed to be a 2-story facade. And they made that work by including this really unusual atrium. So we're going to be fixing that. We're going to be removing that 3-story building, retaining everything that you see in red, which is historic, and kind of rebuilding that building to be a proper 2-story structure. Next slide. We have a lot of old photos of the building. Unfortunately, we don't have any that show the original facade or the original storefront is what I should mention. The best photo is the bottom left, but that's, believe it or not, from the 80s, and that's the facade, the storefront that's there today. Next slide. And so one of the best things we have to go on was that article that I mentioned. And so the list of, this is just kind of a general outline of the improvements that we'll be making. We'll be taking the stucco piers and replacing them with the matching Winsboro granite. Winsboro granite is from the state of South Carolina. We're recommending replacing the wood columns with cast iron columns. The existing knee walls, which are ceramic tile, we're going to be replacing those with a wood paneled look that you would see in Charleston. The steps will be removed and the building will be restored to its original 2-story form. In addition, there are a number of maintenance related things that we'll be doing, including repairing terracotta and brick. The existing veneer that's wood, that's black, is plywood. It's not very good quality. We'll be replacing that with sapele. And we're recommending that we put in leaded glass transoms where you have the arched windows there. So it's going to be a big upgrade. Next slide. On the left, you have the 2-dimensional elevation. All those notes that I just read, they're on this drawing as well. And then on the right, you can see what that storefront's going to look like. And it's going to be one of the best storefronts on Charleston when complete. Next slide. And here's a comparison of the building section. So on the left, you have the 3-story section that exists today. And then on the right, you have the 2-story section, which is what we are preparing to do. Next slide. Okay, moving on to 367 King Street. We're going to be really replacing this storefront. It's just, the detail is fairly minimal and a lot of the wood is rotten. So we will be keeping the geometry that you see here, but all of the woodwork will be replaced with some hardwood like sapele that will be painted, and will be really goosing up the detail level on this storefront as well. Next slide. On the left, you see what we refer to as the hyphen. And that hyphen will be the new front door to the student housing complex. At the BAR Small, we were granted approval of demolition of the hyphen, with the exception we propose that we keep the cornices, which are historic. Everything that you see in wood siding was built after 1973 and is not historic. And I'll show you some more backup on that in a moment. And then the storefront on the right, that is 369 King. We call that the Wave. And although I think it's very interesting and kind of cool, it has not weared well and is really in need of replacement. So we'll be fully replacing the storefront at 369 King. And I want to point out, you can see the terrazzo at the entrance that says Lessers. This used to be a jewelry store once upon a time, and our intent is to restore that terrazzo at the entrance there, which is going to be awesome. Next slide. I just wanted to show a couple Sanborn maps to highlight that the hyphen, which we have an arrow on, was an open porch at one time. And over time, it got filled in, and really not the best way. And so the design that we're proposing is a more glassy and open and contemporary design that is a subtle nod to the openness that would have occurred when it was a piazza. Next slide. This is some more historic photographs. We have a lot of these. I just want to direct you to the Lesser's building. You can see the storefront, which is that concave design. It's faceted. Our intent is to rebuild a storefront of similar geometry, except it's going to be made of painted sapele and glass. Next slide. So this is a three-dimensional image. You have the existing conditions on the left, and you have the new proposal on the right. Probably the most transformative change would be the hyphen, which is really kind of a Frankenstein design right now. What exists today, we're proposing a much more open and glassy entrance. But one of the best things about it is it's going to expose and make visible the sides of the existing historic buildings. And you'll have a little atrium when you enter into this new building. And then you can see on the right, 369 King Street, where the wave facade has been replaced by a wood and glass storefront. Next slide. Here is an existing two-dimensional elevation. And if you go to the next slide, this is really a demolition diagram that shows the materials that will be replaced. Next slide. And then this is what the new facade will look like. I should point out that the hyphen will now be 3 stories, but that third floor is pushed back over 15 feet to a distance where it's really marginally visible, if at all. Next slide. And here is a 3-dimensional rendering of what the new streetscape is going to look like. It's going to be a tremendous upgrade. I'm really excited about 363 King. It's just going to be a striking storefront. I'm also really excited about the hyphen. And if you look in the next slide, you can see a different angle, and you can see the benefits in that kind of translucency that hyphen creates, which is going to be really, really great. You can also see in this image the storefront for 369 King and that concave faceted design. Next slide. Okay, so those were the 3 historic buildings. Now I'm going to present to you the new building. This is a new 7-story structure that will be student apartments for the College of Charleston. Next. This is a site plan with King Street on the right. North is up. All of the retail that currently exists today on King Street will be retained. And in 2 out of the 3 stores, it'll actually be made larger. And of course, I just highlighted the facade changes. The hyphen will provide entrance along King Street to the lobby, which is really in the back. So the student housing building is really tucked behind the historic buildings. There is an alley on the far left of this drawing. And that alley is pretty gracious, and it connects to George Street. So there'll be a secondary entrance for the building on the top left corner of the lobby. And I suspect most of the students will actually use this because it's a direct path to the cistern. And I do want to highlight that all of our utilities and our trash are on the west side of the building and will not go through King Street. So that's a really positive thing. Next slide. This is an enlarged ground floor plan. So you can see again the retail on King Street, the narrow entrance to the lobby. There are a few apartments at this level, but it's primarily support space for the building. Next slide. This is what level 2 looks like. It is all apartments once you get to level 2, as well as in the historic buildings along King Street. We will have apartments above the retail. There is a gap of approximately 10 feet in between the historic buildings and the new building. Next slide. Level 3 looks pretty much the same as level 2. Next. Levels 4, 5, and 6 are identical. Next. And this is level 7. I suspect we'll talk about this a lot because we are in the 6-story height district. And as such, to be able to do a 7th floor, we need to get approval from you all based off of architectural merit and context, which I'm going to talk about when I talk about the elevations. But this is the main amenity floor of the building. We studied this floor very diligently and made a footprint that was very minimal and set back as much as possible from King Street. And what you're going to see on the next images is that it's marginally visible, but it will create a nice space for the students as well as a nice top to the building. Next slide. This is the roof plan. On top of the amenities, we are going to have a green roof for the building, which is I'm really excited about. It's one of the many ways to deal with stormwater. You won't be able to see this unless you maybe go into the Francis Marion Hotel or the Bennett Hotel, but it will be a nice feature for the building. Next. This is what the building section looks like. The penthouse roof is a sloped roof. It is a single slope. One of the reasons we did that was to minimize the visual impact that's seen from a distance. Next slide. So now I'm going to talk about the inspiration for the design of the new building. We always look to the immediate context to kind of pull cues from the architecture. We have two really exceptional facades here in the Williams-Sonoma building and the building at 363 King. And some of the items that we felt like were worth noting were the vertical proportions of these facades, the fact that they have masonry and that they've layered the facades, and that there are these really articulated window surrounds. And then, of course, the tops of buildings along King Street are exceptional, with really articulated cornices, as well as little pop-ups on the top of the roof, which add to the streetscape. Next slide. You know, this is the time of year where Charlestonians stop complaining about how hot it is and we start complaining about how cold it's gotten so quickly. So I wanted to cheer everybody up with the little snow picture. But I wanted to highlight that this is a building for students that are going to be going to the College of Charleston. Therefore, we felt like it needed to have a collegiate feel to it or an institutional feel. And so just looking at some of the details from this building here, again, we have that layering of the facade. I really appreciate how they've taken two levels of windows and stitched them together to make one vertical booth. And the use of color, I think, is really interesting. That green color you see occurs in and around the cistern. So we've pulled some of that into our design. Next slide. The penthouse and how we clad that was something that we studied again at infinitum. I really appreciate these copper and glass penthouses that you see in Charleston. Copper is just a wonderful material, and that's what we were proposing that the penthouse be clad in. Next slide. Okay, this is a two-dimensional elevation of what exists today. The building you see in the background is the existing campus center building. Next slide. And this is the building that we are proposing. So the predominant form of the building is 6 stories. And then you see the penthouse roof that sets back. Some of the items that I mentioned earlier about accentuating vertical proportions by tying together multiple levels of windows, by adding additional detail at the tops of the building where it is most visible. Next slide. If you could peel away those King Street facades, this is the architecture that you would see. The building is to be clad in brick. I like working with brick because you can do a lot with corbelling to get layered details. So the window surrounds around the windows are going to be made of corbelled brick, as well as many of the components of the cornice. The penthouse that you can see will be clad in copper and will be highly glazed as well to almost be like a lantern on top of the building. Next slide, please. This is the overall streetscape elevation, existing on the bottom, new on top. Next slide. This is the north elevation. This facade is largely hidden, but nonetheless, it is a handsome facade. It's been carefully studied. It has great balance to it. And the parts that you will see will be very attractive. Next slide. This is the south facade. Unfortunately, this facade really is not visible, but it will have a lot of the same details, but it is much more pared down and simplified. Next. This is the west facade, which, like the south, will not be visible. Next. This is a streetscape of St. Philip Street. You have the Simmons Center in the foreground. You have this campus center apartments in the background. And then you see the little peak of our penthouse that pops up on the top left. Next slide. This is probably the best drawing of the new building because you can see some of the details at a larger scale. We've showed some images of the materials on the bottom of using a really light colored brick, using metal panel. Because this building is going to be hard to get to, every material needs to be extremely durable. So brick and metal were chosen for those exact reasons. Copper is just a beautiful material that patina, so we're excited about that. And then the green roof, which will be on the sloped portion of the roof. Next slide. And we're almost through. I'm going to show you some 3D images. This has been hard for us to show because it's not very visible. So what I have on the right is an image from Marion Square. I took that photo about a month ago. And then on the left, we have a 3D view of the same vantage point of what exists today. And so again, if you were to peel away all of the trees, this is what you would see on the left. So in the next slide, you'll see a rendering. And again, so that you can actually see the architecture, we've kind of pared down the trees. And you can see that the top of the building, the 6th floor, would be visible. But the penthouse itself is really marginally visible. The elevator overruns are really what you would see. Next slide. This is a vantage point from the very far corner of Marion Square. Again, we have an existing photo on the right and a 3-dimensional image on the left. And so again, if you could pull away the trees, this is what you would see on the left. Next slide. And then here's a rendering that shows the new building. Next. One of the vantage points that you will see, the 6th floor and the elevator overruns, is along Calhoun Street. if you see the photo at the bottom right, there's a little break in the buildings. And so you just will see the 6th floor and the top cornice. Next slide. The architecture of the penthouse and the massing is something we studied a lot. We started with the flat roof, which you see on the far left. We then went to a sloped roof that you see in the middle. We felt like the middle option, flipped it. We put the high side of the roof on the south. And you can see that it makes a tremendous impact on the visibility of that penthouse floor. Next slide. Next. This is the last slide, I promise. We're here asking for conceptual BAR approval. We're also asking for your approval of a 7th floor based off of architectural merit and context. I mentioned earlier that this is a tour de force, this project. It's going to test every architectural skill I have. There's an extraordinary amount of work that is going into these historic buildings. And I think that that very much contributes to this bonus floor that we're asking for. In addition, the architecture that we're preparing for the new building, I think is very high level. It follows the BAR guidelines, is handsomely detailed, and we're using very top-notch materials with brick, copper, and I think the fact that we're using a green roof is worth noting. I think for all of those reasons, we believe that this is an ideal project for the bonus floor. An approval of this will allow a greater amount of students to live closer to campus and will allow for greater funds for us to rehabilitate these older buildings. So with that, I will open it up to any questions you all may have.
Thank you. Any questions of board or staff?
This is Leon Scott. Steve, just a quick question. You mentioned the wood columns. I think it was at 367. Wood columns that would be removed. Are those original columns?
So I can answer that. So it's actually 363, King.
Okay, I'm sorry.
And so they would be the black columns that you see on the top in the top rendering. The columns that exist now are wood and are not original.
Okay.
We have that photo from the 80s.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you. That's all.
Sure.
Steve, I believe it was at 367. Sorry, this is James. You mentioned that a hardwood like sapele would be used on that storefront. You mentioned sapele used on the other areas on storefronts. What other material other than sapele would be proposing?
Well, I mean, I think if we're building it today, I mean, I think that's the choice, sapele. And so what I've learned from the guys that do millwork is that the hardwood that is the choice today could change in years when that source becomes depleted. But as of today, sapele is one of the better hardwoods we have available. So we would likely use that.
Any other questions? All right, well, shall we move on then to public comments? Let's go with the in-person or audio public comment, and then I have a number of written comments to read into the record.
Jay, our first person is Aaron Minigan.
Hmm?
Thank you. Erin Minigan, Preservation Society of Charleston. The Preservation Society is very appreciative of the architect reaching out to us and walking us through the project. We foremost would like to commend the improvements to the historic buildings along King Street. Clearly, a lot of research went into these proposals, and I'm thrilled to see this group of buildings being restored. However, we feel the hyphen needs further consideration as it's currently reading a bit severe right up on King Street, and we would encourage studying this design more traditional forms and materials, as some historic materials are being retained on the hyphen, and it directly relates to two adjacent historic facades. Shifting to the new construction, we again want to reiterate appreciation to the architect for the thought that went into this proposal. We have seen solid improvement over the past few weeks through our conversations with the architect. There are very positive aspects to the design as it appears to present a high level of detail and good quality materials. However, this is a massive structure that will have a strong presence on King Street, and that gives us pause. King Street is Charleston's most important historic commercial corridor, and this building will inevitably change one of the most prominent views of this street. We have walked the site and carefully studied the plans and virtual model of the proposed building, which confirms the height and mass of the building will be quite visible from Marion Square and various areas along King and Calhoun Streets. The visual impact can best be reviewed on page 37, that shows the building's proximity to King Street, and page 41C, that illustrates its visibility from Marion Square. We encourage greater moves to be made to address the perceived height and mass by stepping the building down and back from King Street. Regarding the penthouse, while we agree it's an interesting feature, we feel it's overly tall and does not enhance the design of the overall building. Our primary objective is to urge extreme caution to the BAR in weighing this decision. Additional height for architectural merit and context is reserved for the most exceptional cases and should not be awarded lightly. In fact, the board has the authority to reduce buildings by a half story, and given the proximity of this building to Charleston's most significant historic commercial street, we encourage you to have a conversation and consider that. Generally, we feel the project should be deferred for restudy of the height, mass, and impact of the building on King Street. Thank you.
Next, Jay, we've got Justin from Historic Charleston. Just 1 second.
Good evening. This is Justin Schwebler with the Historic Charleston Foundation. Like Aaron said, we would like to thank the applicants for providing us with detailed presentations of this project over the past few months. They've been very receptive to our comments in all of those meetings throughout their design process. I should first mention that HCF currently holds an easement on the front facade of 363 King Street, and we're currently working with the applicants to resolve some legal issues regarding that easement. We do, however, think that the applicants should be commended for their dedication to the restoration of the historic structures along King Street. The applicants have shown a considerable amount of attention to detail in reestablishing appropriate storefronts for these historic structures. We feel that though it should not count for the totality of their case for architectural merit, the sensitive restoration of these historic structures should be considered as an honorable cause to partially justify their request for an extra story. We do, however, have several comments regarding the proposed student apartment. The top 2 stories of the apartment building are finely finished with brick corbels, a detailed cornice, and accentuated window surrounds. In order to meet the requirement for architectural merit, we feel that this level of detail should, at the very least, extend down to the 4th floor of the apartment building. It's hard to justify the architectural merit of the building when only 2 of the 6 floors receive any improvement in material palette or design, regardless of the building's visibility from King Street. With regards to the 7th story, we feel that the case has not been made for the necessity of these accessory spaces. Places to exercise, socialize, study, or cook can easily be accommodated within the 6-story massing of the apartment building, and students could have access to the roof deck without the addition of a large 7th-story structure. The 7th-story shed roof structure seems too dissimilar in design from the primary massing of the building. The applicant has stated that they want the 7th story to have an interesting and unique impact on the skyline, but they've also arranged the massing to partially hide the structure. We find these ideals to be contradictory, and the design suffers as a result. The elevator towers are also too visible and intrusive, even with the complementary material treatment. And we believe that the applicants need to rethink the design of the 7th story, and we do not find sufficient architectural merit on the 6th-story massing or the 7th-story addition to justify their request at this time. Thank you.
Jay, that's it for public comment. We can go to the letters now.
Okay, well, buckle up because there are a number. I will proceed through these as swiftly as I can, understanding that most of them are relatively brief to begin with. Oh, I might have accidentally closed them. Bear with me for one quick moment. I apologize. My Adobe Acrobat flaked out on me in the middle of the meeting, so I had to restart it. And in the middle of that, I lost the compiled comments. Here we go. All right, these are all in reference to 363 through 369 King. All right, from Dick Downey of Bowling Green, Kentucky. I am a member of the Preservation Society of Charleston, and I oppose the applications for additional height of this project. There's insufficient showing of architectural merit and context. The historic nature of the surrounding property should be carefully weighed. Thank you for your consideration. Then from John Kennedy, Coolblow Street, the 5th and 6th floors are the only redeeming qualities of the new building. Floors 1 through 4 are incredibly lackluster. The 7th floor being requested based on architectural merit is disjointed from the floors below. This is easily visible from Marion Square and should be better integrated. The new building reads as 3 separate buildings with no architectural connection between them. From Christine Greenleaf in Somerville, South Carolina. Thank you for allowing me to comment on this. I'm not in favor of the additional story for the student housing development. One additional floor is not going to make a big difference in the quantity of on-campus housing. This is not worth further changing the traditional view of King Street and its skyline. Okay, from Kathleen Rivers on Atlantic Street. We continue to cook the goose that laid the golden egg. As a resident of this beautiful city for over 40 years, it saddens me to see enormous challenges of flooding, parking, traffic congestion, and other issues. Oh, well, that's not pertinent to our purview. Urge the BAR to examine extremely carefully any and all proposals that continue to push the boundaries of the city. I believe they're talking about the additional height. Ellen Harley at Wentworth Street. I write to oppose this application as it would be most visible from Marion Square over the 2 and 3 story buildings along King Street, inevitably changing the landscape of one of Charleston's most important historic commercial corridors. Please carefully consider this request and its effect on the future of Charleston's historic district and vote no on lifting the height limit. From Allison Owings on Elmwood. This abuse of height restrictions and the sprawling change of historic Charleston's district has to stop. When is enough enough? You're ruining our city. From Bodane on Meeting Street. I'm writing in respect to item 2 being discussed at today's meeting. While I agree as a general principle, achieving additional density by increasing height on block interiors is a good one, and the BAR should award additional height for buildings of particular architectural merit. I think that in this instance, awarding an additional 7th story would be a mistake. With respect to the first point, the kind of hidden height that we should promote on block interiors is not present with this project. Due to the project's specific location, it would prove disruptive from just about any angle from Marion Square, which of course is an important and historic view corridor. I also agree that the design of the stories that are buildable by right within the height district have some architectural merit. They're generally attractive. However, this does not seem to me to be the case, the 7th story. 7th story penthouse level breaks with the context sensitive design that's been proposed for the rest of the building. Surely, if you're going to award a bonus floor, the bonus floor should continue the architectural merit that got it awarded in the first place. All right. And that is all of the letters that we received on that application. All right, at this point, we will move on to city staff comments and recommendation.
Okay. comments have been broken into three parts. The first is general. Second involves the historic structures, and the third involves the new residential block. So with that, generally, the project does a very good job of preserving, restoring, renovating, rehabilitating, or remodeling the existing historic structures while providing a minimally visible, differential, but interesting new residential block to the rear. Applicant is requesting an additional floor based on architectural merit and context, which will need to be addressed, of course, by the board. Okay, B, historic structures, which is broken down into 367 King, actually 363 King, 367 King, the hyphen, and 369 King. So 363 King, although columns and pilasters are mentioned in a newspaper article as being finely wrought, which the applicant has chosen to interpret as iron and then by extension cast iron, it is unclear to staff what this material originally was, and further research should be done to establish and provide similar material. The entryway flooring believed to be placed in the 1981 renovation is proposed to be removed, hopefully to expose a large piece of granite reported to be at this location. Careful minor exploratory demolition should occur to ascertain existing conditions prior to final review. This storefront detailing should be comparable with other typical traditional nearby storefronts. On 367 King, little change is proposed here. Any necessary revisions to detailing should be compatible with other typical traditional nearby storefronts. At the hyphen, as little historic building fabric exists, staff is supportive with this portion being represented as a new contemporary entry into the new residential complex, and appreciates its subtle and downplayed detailing. Any lighting at the third floor terrace overlooking King Street will need to be subdued and inconspicuous. At 369 King, while staff has no issue with the general direction applicant is taking with this facade, the wood should be painted to be more in keeping with other typical traditional nearby storefronts, as well as for maintenance. The awning needs to be moved upward to an appropriate height on the facade. on for the new residential block, the front of this portion of the building is a minimum of 50 feet from the building facades on King Street, and applicant has gone to lengths to ensure that it will have little, if any, impact on King Street. While portions of this front facade will only be seen in very small parts from King Street, the facade is well composed, with the two top floors having well articulated, recessed, and well-spaced stacked windows separated by spandrel panels over the unseen bottom floors with simple punched openings. Care needs to be taken in the detailing of these spandrel panels to avoid how they will read on drawings as heavy lines. These panel joints need to be visually minimized, and the mint color may be a little too bold. Staff suggests finding a more subtle color for these panels. The cornice of this upper portion should be simplified. It should be noted that GFRP is proposed for this cornice, and while it is an appropriate location for its use, samples will need to be reviewed by the board of the actual material to be used. The penthouse level is nicely designed with a shed roof, amenities structured coupled with elevator overrides set well back from the parapet at the east and the north, comprising less than half of the roof footprint. This shed roof design and orientation came about from a series of studies to minimize visibility of the penthouse, and while an unusual feature for a rooftop in this area, it works well in this location. It is noted that the penthouse is shown with a green roof. Although setback from King Street, lighting at the terrace area will need to be studied carefully to avoid any hot spots in this area. Applicant has provided adequate justification for additional height based on architectural merit and context, and therefore staff recommends conceptual approval with board and staff comments, with approval for an additional story as shown based on architectural merit and context.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Courtney. A moment for an applicant response.
Sure, I will be brief. Well, in regards to Mr. Courtney's comments, we agree that we should get conceptual approval. And all of the detail related items about the stone and the wood and the metal are certainly things that we will continue to evolve as the project matures. I want to thank Historic Charleston Foundation and Preservation Society for being really helpful resources to us throughout the process, especially regarding historic buildings. That has been a huge help, as well as their feedback about the new building. Although we don't necessarily agree on everything, but I think that's great that we can have this discourse. Just, one comment I'll say is that a long time ago, a teacher told me that urban buildings are about bottoms and tops. Urban buildings are about bottoms and tops. So you put the most emphasis at the ground level where folks can touch and feel and really appreciate the architecture. And I feel like we're hitting a home run there with what we're achieving with these historic structures. And then the next most important part is the top of the building, because the tops of buildings are often what form the streetscape or the cityscape. And I think we've put a lot of focus and attention to what we're doing to the top of the building. Yes, the penthouse is really not visible, but that was intentional, and that we wanted to really pare down the massing of it. But we feel like the detailing, the materials of brick and copper are exceptional details and materials that we're really proud of. And is the building going to be visible from certain angles? Yes, it will be. But I'm really proud of that as an architect and citizen of Charleston, because I think it's really going to add to the streetscape, and in no way will it damage or ruin anything in Charleston. And I'm really confident of that. Thank you.
Okay. More discussion. Well, I may jump in to this one first, if y'all don't mind. I do appreciate the level of effort that's gone into the presentation. I'll start with the historic structures, and y'all have got one of the most significant Romanesque facades on King Street within this project. And I appreciate the research y'all have done so far in mining the history of 363. But I think a lot more needs to be done if y'all are going to set about a restoration of the building. Staff is correct. The 1892 article that references finely wrought columns, that does not, using the language of that time, that does not indicate that those were iron. It's likely that they were wood. They might not be the same columns that are there today. But I think more research into primary sources is necessary, because while Bob Stockton is a great historian of Charleston, what you've got there in that article from 81 is a secondary source, and you need primary sources. You might not find much in photographs, but you need to look, and you also need to pay attention to the physical evidence that you can find in that building. Patterns of ghosting, material evidences, careful selective demolition like staff was suggesting are really vital to understanding what that facade should be like. Right now, the proposal is fairly conjectural. And with a facade that's notable, even though it's a category 3, it's really important that you undertake that effort. Now, when it comes to the new building, oh, and by the way, I don't have any problem with the hyphen. I think it's fine. Now, with the new building, well, this is a trick. I mean, it's a nicely composed facade. It's not objectionably masked. It's just that in preparation for this, I went back to the ordinance that the city adopted, and what the ordinance says is that architectural merit means a project that reflects exemplary architectural and urban design, utilizes the highest level of materials and finishes, and contributes to the public realm. In short, I don't think this proposal does that. It's nice that 7th story is set back. You're almost at a 6.5 story proposal as a result of that. But when you view it from Marion Square, the massing of this proposal just blends into the massing of campus center apartments, and it really disturbs the proportions of that entrance to the King Street corridor. And even though it is proposed to be built out of brick, looks like the materials are pretty good. They're just not excellent. As I read that clause in the ordinance, you hear some pretty emphatic language, exemplary, highest, and that I was around when we adopted this ordinance, and I remember the discussions that underpinned this piece, and it really is for the very best of the best. And while I appreciate the restoration efforts that are going into King Street, you know, a sensitive restoration of those facades, according to the principles under which Charleston operates, well, it's all a prerequisite. I actually think that the PSC is onto something, that really this proposal ought to be knocked down to 5.5 stories, as we have the right to do as a board, to further limit the massing towards the east, as would be most visible from Marion Square in particular. I don't think this project is anywhere ready for approval. I think if we defer it and don't specifically reject the height question and even go further and impose a reduction of a 1/2 story, then we're going to do this project a disservice, because we won't be sending a clear message. I really think it ought to be denied for height, with instruction to reduce it by 1/2 story to 5.5 stories, and the remainder of the proposal deferred.
This is Luda Sobchuk. So I will also divide my comments into the historic structures and facades. Seems to be on the right path. And obviously further research for the 363, the storefront is needed, columns is needed, what material it should be. But it's actually on yes, it's on the right path, and it would be really great to restore those, particularly the bottom first level on each of the 3 buildings. The hyphen, I'm also okay with it. I actually think it could be more glassy, more contemporary as a hyphen, and it used to be the porch, so the porch obviously rails and columns and things like that, but since it's not there, maybe a more contemporary approach would be even nicer, in my opinion. As far as the new building, I have to echo Jay with all his comments. I feel like it's really will be visible, and not, I mean, visibility is okay if it's done right, but it looks really heavy, really imposing on the front structures, existing structures. The penthouse, maybe it's materials are fine, nicely designed, but not for this building, seems to be. It's kind of dissociates itself from the main structure, and the overall height. I think 5.5 story is that what we need to really concentrate on and get that building down, and much more detailing studies of the massing will need to be presented. I would think it's not ready as well. I'm done.
Well, Jay, I'll add that, start with the hyphen. Stephen, the one picture you showed that appeared to be nighttime, and maybe the glass was illuminated from the backside. When I looked at that picture, it made me lose some of the identity of the buildings on either side. But when I looked at it in the other portions of the plan, I felt differently about it. So I'm mixed on the hyphen. I also believe that today, I certainly could not vote for the additional story. And prior to this meeting, considered about the reduction in height also. But I do want to acknowledge that I went out to Marion Square and anticipated the volume of that would be visible from Marion Square if the trees were gone. And it, you know, can you see it? Yes, you can, but you have to position yourself in order to do that. And I just wanted to acknowledge that I went out there and took time and looked at it, but you can see through it. It is, I find it over, I believe that it felt like it was overwhelming at the 7 stories.
This is Leon Scott. I'm in agreement with my colleagues here. I also found that the height was, and would have a difficult time giving approval on the height. And in agreement with everyone in terms of the visibility, and it certainly needs further study. But I think the height is the real challenge.
Okay, any further comment or a motion?
If I may ask a question again, the green roof, what exactly is the significance of that? Question to Steve.
You said, what is the significance?
For this building specifically.
Well,
and how it's designed and how it's located and things like that.
sure.
And size of it.
With the city's new stormwater requirements, it's becoming more and more difficult to meet what the requirements are. And most people are burying a big concrete tank underground, which we're going to have to do some of that as well. And this is a great way to address stormwater in a more aesthetically pleasing and sustainable way. That's just it's an awesome feature.
Well, when it's sloped, would it be some runoff of the water?
Yeah, so you have to capture it. So it's designed to hold the water.
Okay.
So Jay, I'll make a motion. And I'm torn because my instinct right now is to move to the 5.5 stories, but because of my respect for Steve and the fact that it would be worthy for him to have the opportunity to make the building height the 6 stories. I guess I need to ask a question. If I recommend, or if I make a motion for deferral of the application, does that prohibit us from going to 5.5 stories in the next meeting? And I just don't know the answer to that, and I don't feel awkward asking it out. I don't know.
That's a good question. I think it. Yeah, I see where you're coming from. I think though, from the applicant's perspective, it's better to just go ahead and give clear and direct guidance from the get-go, because if they get deferred this evening and they're told, well, you just can't have the additional floor, and then they go back and revise the design at some significant effort, come back with a 6-story proposal, and then they're told at that point, actually 5.5 is more appropriate. That's I think we as a board have to just sort of decide what direction we're going to give this applicant tonight, so that they have clarity moving forward. I mean, legally, could we do it? Yeah, sure.
An architect.
Yeah, legally, could we do that? Yeah, we could legally do that. It's just, I think we ought to just go ahead and just make a decision.
Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna say this another way then. See, here's the way that the board is leading. I think it's very clear. And so if he makes the choice to come back as 6 stories instead of 5.5, then he's making that choice. I mean, let me say the general consensus, it seems to me, of the board is that 5.5 stories is the right way to go. And maybe I'm pushing the can down the street, not suggesting, or not just going, yeah, let's go to the 5.5 stories. But I believe that there are always creative ways to work things out. And I will tell you that I'm not sure that I'm going to be moved to keep a 6th floor, meaning I think it's appropriate to go to the 5.5 stories. I do. But I also know that he may be able to create something that I haven't thought about. And I guess that's the question. And I mean, you know, I said I was going to make a motion, but I also would like to still be talking among board members. I'd like to get somebody's opinion on that too, because I believe it should be 5.5 stories, but I also believe if we end that right now, we might miss something that would be great. I don't see it, but thoughts.
This Leon Scott. I'm also in agreement with the 5.5. And if I mean, I just don't know what's the best way of doing that.
Well, I think, Leon, you can just make a motion and say it's 5.5, but you know, and that's it.
Okay. So now if we make a motion of 5.5, now what does are we deferring it, or what are we doing? How are we able to still come back with 5.5?
Well, the way you would structure a motion like that is to defer the height of the project, taking into consideration board comments regarding 5.5 stories.
Okay.
That you can do that. I mean, what the conversation that's going on right now would either be that height, scale, and like I think it would be important to address height, scale, mass, and general architectural direction somewhat separately, because we have differing. You know, we're very concerned about the height, but the massing isn't as critical, and the general architectural direction seem to get the least critique. But it sounds like y'all are moving towards some form of deferral. And if we want to give the applicant specific direction on the number of stories that we think are appropriate, we just include that as a board comment.
I think actually the massing is also an issue because of the 6th story. Okay. You know, so it's kind of halfway through with detailing and architectural direction. But if we reduce to 5.5, we will also address the massing as well. So. Do we, yeah, we have the 2 parts here actually, the historic structures and the new building. Can we divide and look at the historic structures as approval and then defer the new building?
Sure, a split motion is perfectly, you know, whatever makes it most clear for the applicant. Sounds like a split motion might do that.
That I think.
So next time we just pretty much look at the new building.
That would be correct.
Rather than go through.
Ludo, by all means, please make a motion.
Okay, I'm going to try. The first part, addressing the historic buildings, agree with the staff comments, all of them, and including the hyphen. And I will move for the conceptual approval of that part. The new building, we deferral for the pretty much mass and height with the consideration of the 5.5 story rather than 6.5 at this time.
Okay. So let me recite this back to you to make sure. Well, I'm trying to capture the intent here. So what I have here is conceptual approval of historic buildings, including hyphen, with staff comments. Deferral of mass and height of new building, including board comments regarding 5.5 stories.
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Anyone wish to second that?
This is Leon Scott. I will second.
Okay. So we have a motion made and seconded. All right. Mr. Metters, how do you vote?
Nay.
Was that a
Not in favor.
yay or not?
Nay,
nay?
not in favor.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Subject.
Yay in favor.
Okay. Mr. Scott.
Yay in favor.
All right. And the chair votes yay in favor. The motion carries 3-1.
Thanks, you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, item number 3 on the agenda is 102 President Street. Applicant is requesting conceptual approval for new construction of a 6-story mixed-use student housing development, requesting 1 additional story based on architectural merit and context. Some context photos. This is site here bounded in red with President running north and south here and Cannon running east-west along here. Looking southwest from the intersection of President and Cannon Streets. Same shot basically. And looking northwest from about the same spot. Looking west on Cannon. Previous motion was deferral of height, scale, and mass and architectural merit of additional 6th floor, including all board comments and staff comments C, D, and E. Previous board comments included that this is a pivotal corner that MUSC and hotel developments from the bridge and going east is residential, which one to lead? Question mark. Architectural, it is nicely detailed, solid urban design, but hard to digest having it here. It's massive. Fifth floor could be lighter looking, and colonnade needs to be consistent. At the moment, they could not support sixth floor. Needs softer approach here. The corner can support the height, but cannot support this application at this time. Another of the members said somewhat in agreement, location of the building and what a great many residents have said being blocked in. All it exists right now in good conscience can't support it. Reconsider sixth floor and massing of building. Another comment was that it is a transition piece of property between MUSC and Ken and Elliott Borough. Believe this property can support the height, but colonnade, they said that the base needs to be more bold. Appears to be top heavy. After the discussions we have had, may be a good time to defer this application. Previous staff comments were that applicant is in the process of having property rezoned, and that has, I think, been done. And that additional story for architectural merit and context must be approved by the board. The massing has been well modulated at the rear with step backs to allow for more air and light into the nicely developed pocket park area between this building and East Street Flats to the east. Massing along President Street has been well broken up into vertical elements into the east and west, separated by an amenities court at the second floor level. Staff recommends the facade study one shown on sheet 25 for all of the tower front corners on President Streets as it helps to establish a rhythm across the overall President Street facade and reinforce the 103 pattern for the stacked windows. Also, there needs to be a clearly defined strong corners of the second floor with columns as wide as practical and spaced equally along the entire President Street facade to reinforce the true colonnade present at the northeast corner. The tower of the cornice needs to be more articulated. The roof overhang at the recessed top floor should be minimized. Any visible rooftop MEP equipment will need to be screened, and our recommendation at that time was conceptual approval with staff and board comments, noted with approval for an extra story based on architectural merit and context. So with that, let's go with the applicant's presentation, Ms. Wheeler.
Yes, this is Josh Vogel. I'm represent the ownership. And up here, I'm getting a text. And Linda, can you unmute 843-577-2163?
Yes, just a sec.
Thanks.
Oh, sorry, got the wrong one.
Hello?
Is
Hello,
that
can you
Carol?
hear us now?
Yes.
All right.
Great, thank you. I'm sorry about that. This is Carol Wheeler with Goff D'Antonio Associates. I'm here today with one of our developers, Josh Vogel, and our landscape architect, Russ Seaman. And I'd follow my previous speakers and would like to ask the chair to add an additional 10 minutes to our presentation, but of course we'll try to be as brief as possible. And with that, we'll have the owner, Josh Vogel, say a few words at the beginning of the presentation. Josh, go ahead.
Thanks, Carol. As Carol mentioned, my name is Josh Vogel. I am one of the development partners for this property. Typically in matters like this request, we would be represented by my partner, Greg Dillon. As he's the public face of this project, I tend to handle more on-the-ground construction-related work. He would have been here tonight, but unfortunately, like many people in 2020, Greg contracted COVID last month and had a really terrible time of it. The good news is that after 5 weeks, he's starting his recovery. And while this is good news, he's not yet at a place where he could appear before you this evening. We are very excited about this project. As Carol will point out, we're focusing on ground floor commercial uses with student housing mainly for MUSC above. There just are not enough housing opportunities for the future doctors, nurses, dentists, pharmacists, residents, fellows, and others who are attending or training at MUSC that are in close proximity to campus. This lack of student housing opportunity was clear in our early meetings with the area residents and neighborhood associations. Before we even started on the design of the building, when we were just trying to get the height district zoning change to add a possibility of a 6th floor, one of the neighbors asked if we could build even higher, as there was so much demand for student housing that is in close proximity of the medical university. We really appreciate the support we've received from the residents of Cannon Borough, Elliott Borough, and the support they have given us at the Planning Commission and City Council for our zoning. We also appreciate the insight the neighborhood has given us and our architects. They were very clear that they expected to see architecture of significance at this site. Andrew Gould was very clear. The neighborhood would support us if we do something exceptional. And if we did not, we would expect their opposition and objections. I'm proud of the work our architectural team has done with this site. I'm appreciative of Marion and Andrew's input and the input of their board and members. We have worked hard to gain neighborhood support for this project and the additional floor. An emphasis was placed on the highest quality materials and exceptional detail shown, all of which went beyond our initial expectations and budget. But in seeking the sixth floor, our architects and our neighborhood association were clear. This level of quality and detail was expected. Our property sits at an important intersection. Going down President Street, it signifies one's arrival into the medical district. Headed from West Ashley, it marks the end of a series of parking garages and makes it clear that one is nearing a residential neighborhood. As such, it is a transition zone. We've designed our ground floor to take advantage of that transition, that intersection. Our hope is that it will create a sense of place with restaurants and shops to support both neighborhoods and bracket that transition between residential and medical and contribute to the public good. I hope that each of you are as excited about this project and its architecture as I am. The Goff D'Antonio team has drawn something special. And I hope that you can see and appreciate our vision for this project, both from a use standpoint and architecturally. And most importantly, I hope that we'll earn your support this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. I will continue to talk about our architectural changes we have incorporated since our last meeting. And before that, I'll talk a little bit more about the context. If you could skip to page 4, please, Lawrence. As Josh has mentioned, and as the BAR has stated in their comments the last time, our site is a transitional site at the entry to the Cannonboro-Elliottboro residential neighborhood, but also it signifies an entry to the more urban MUSC district. So the bottom 2 pages show a diagrammatic aerial view that shows the uses, that shows the different areas that our property is bordering, the property shown in red. And what Josh has also mentioned is that when you enter the site from West Ashley, you pass a row of parking garages that are 6 stories and taller, and then you arrive at our site. And to the south of our site, you see at the bottom right image, we're basically nestled within the the higher density MUSC district, and a row of parking garages. Next slide, please. If we move a little closer to our property, you see the existing parking lot that has been vacant for over 30 years and wasn't being able to be developed and is an eyesore to the neighborhood. That parking lot is bordered by 2 broad streets, President Street and Cannon Street. And to the north of our site, we have a drainage improvement park that is a city project that leaves a little bit more breathing space right in front of our site as well, and puts 120 feet between the north of our property line and of our property and the next adjacent lower residence. Next to that, we'll expect 3.5 stories future townhouses also to the north of our site. And then to the east, we have the B Street Flats building that's shown at the top left of the page. This is a 4- and 5-story building that was designed as a motel and has been converted to a condominium building that is mainly renting out units. Adjacent to that is an MUSC research building, a 4-story building that appears more like a 5-story building due to high floor-to-floor heights. And then to the south of our site, we have a paved parking lot that belongs to the B Street Flats property. And to the west of our site, we have a 6-story parking garage with a helicopter pad that is covering the entire block along President Street and Cannon Street. Next slide, please. a few more context images. Since we are asking for an additional floor for this project, the context is an important component of this request. And at the bottom right, you see the entry to the Cannonboro neighborhood currently, and the parking garage that is adjacent to our site is here seen as basically creating the gateway into the neighborhood as you enter it from the Septima Clark Parkway. And at the end of that building is our site, and we feel that this site needs an iconic gateway building to properly address the entrance into the neighborhood and the MUC. The existing parking lot and the B Street Flats building that has no historic or architectural significance. So again, the site pleads to a new gateway, an attractive gateway building. At the top left, you see the lower Cannon Street as you approach our site. There's a MUSC research building. You can't see currently our site with the planting and streetscapes, the street trees, but you see at the very end the parking garage. At the bottom left, it shows our adjacent building, the B Street Flats building, and the distance to the adjacent MUSC research building, which is only 20 feet, just for the context. And the bottom right image shows the adjacent residence, the B Street Flats building, as it faces our existing parking lot, and shows the fact that there's no streetscape activation there at all. There's you see a fence, and there's a current parking lot there, so we're trying to change that. The top right image is a building from President Street, and you can see the entrance into the higher density MUSC district. Next slide, please. This property, next slide. This property has some issues with flooding as well, so we're trying to address that in our design, which I'll explain later. Next, and the next slide shows the our proposed site plan. We're proposing a U-shaped building. Next slide, please. A U-shaped building that opens up towards President Street to break up the mass along that street. And we are placing an active amenity courtyard opposite a parking garage, which is unoccupied, which makes a lot of sense to us to put this active space opposite a parking garage and not another residence. To the east of our site, we have placed units and have the bedrooms of units face the adjacent residence building again, which makes sense because the adjacent building, as you can see on the right, it has an access corridor, which is reminiscent of the original motel use. But when you look at that facade, you enter the unit from that corridor, and the small windows that you see, those are the windows to the bedrooms of the units. So the units of the adjacent building have internal living rooms and don't have a focus on our site. So again, we're placing our building bedrooms against the bedrooms of the residences to have a quiet interaction there. Next slide. The conceptual massing consists of a very active first floor, and we're using the urban feature of a colonnade to activate the street front and contribute to the public and extend the sidewalk. The additional sixth floor that we're asking for, we are stepping that floor back both from Cannon Street and President Street to step down to the residential neighborhood on the other side of Cannon Street. But in the center of our building, we're showcasing the full height of the 6 stories, and I'll show you the architectural expression of that element as well, which is important for the overall composition. On the east side of our building that faces the adjacent residences, we are creating a new connection, a pedestrian connection from Cannon Street to B Street. If you remember previously, this is a non-activated streetscape, so we are adding a public pocket park in that area that connects to a shared green space that can be used jointly by the adjacent residents, the B Street Flats group, which we are working together with, and by our residents. What we're doing in order to respect the adjacent building in context is here that we are also stepping the building back first on the second floor. So from the second to the fourth floor, we're stepping the building back by 5 feet. And then we have a more significant step back of the fifth and the sixth floor of another 10 foot. And that allows light to come into that shared green space and actually make it usable. Next slide. When we presented this project at the last time, you see the top right is the previous project and the top left is the new proposed project, the new proposed design. We have received a lot of contrasting comments from the public, from the historic groups, and some of the comments did not support the sixth floor. Other comments supported the sixth floor. The BAR stated that they thought that the site can support 6 floors, but not with the current application. They wanted to see changes to the colonnade and to the second floor corners. They mentioned that the previous design looked top heavy and that the 5th floor could be lighter. So we have redesigned the facade and rearranged the spacing and the rhythm of the colonnade. We widened the columns and also the spacing between the columns to make the commercial space more inviting. We have strengthened the corners, the second floor corners, to make that colonnade more bold and confident, so that it can carry the upper mass. On the upper floors, floors 2 to 4, we have rearranged the floor plan to better work with a new colonnade rhythm. We have increased the glazing while still keeping vertical proportions, and we eliminated the corner glazing, which was a point of discussion at the last time. It just didn't seem to work with the strict rhythm of the colonnade. So we have taken away the focus from the corner of the building, put it to the center of each building mass, recessed the building mass here, and added balconies that better reflect the use of the building as well. And to address a former board comment, we have lightened the 5th floor. We've reduced the brick corners to the 4th floor line and softened the material on the 5th floor to an ACM metal panel that is still a high quality material, but it allows us to modulate the tectonics of the building and set the create relief and set the windows back and modulate the corners. I'd like to talk about the 6th floor a little bit more, so let's move to the next slide. That slide actually included a couple of architectural precedents that we have studied throughout the design process. I'm not going to repeat all of that since we went through that at the last presentation, but in the second row, the 2 right images show a building that has has a top floor that is not very visible from the right-of-way. So to the pedestrian, it's not visible, but as you move away from the building, it is very visible and adds to the merit of the building. So that is an approach that we are taking here with our building. Also at the bottom of the screen, the last row of images, the second one shows a brick building on Cannon Street that we have taken as a precedent for some of the brick detailing that we have added to the colonnade. Next slide. Next slide. So as I had mentioned, we have studied the setback of the 6th floor so that it is not very visible from the immediate right-of-way. But as you move to as you move around the building, next slide, towards President Street, you can actually see the full height of the 6th floor with that central tower. So we're expressing the full 6 stories here, have added a cornice with a wood soffit that relates to materials on the colonnade. And we've added brackets and general modulated the facade and added balconies. And this center tower, we have also clad that with an ACM panel to create a contrast to the 2 flanking brick towers. And it balances that symmetrical elevation on President Street. The rest of the 6th floor is more neutral with shading elements above the windows to further reduce the scale. but it is generally expressed the same way as the 5th floor with the ACM panel. Next slide. Our focus, next slide. Our focus for the highest level of materials is on the 1st floor at the colonnade. So we have created this colonnade to extend the sidewalk and create seating areas and create a safe and sheltered space for pedestrians to sit and enjoy an extended public right-of-way. We have added stone panels, stone water tables to the columns and brick detailing. We have a nice wood ceiling, added shading elements and elegant lighting and a large amount of glazing. We're also using specialty pavers. So this is basically an extension of the public realm into the building and contributes to the public realm. Next slide. This is another corner view again. This is the view from, you can go to the next slide. As we move around the building, we have made some adjustments to the south elevation, continued the four-story expression and pushed the stairwell back. These are views from Lower and Upper Cannon Street showing the Gateway building on that side. Next slide. That next slide shows the improvements on Cannon Street with the wider spacing of the colonnade, a larger pocket park for public use, and the addition of the balconies on top. Next slide. At the last meeting, there was concern about that shared green space that we are proposing and that we are working together with the B Street Flats group. And there was a concern that that space would look like, would create a cave-like feeling. And so we are showing you an actual rendering of that space, how that space would feel like. It doesn't feel cave-like at all. We have created this double step back that is very effective so that you can hardly see the 5th and the 6th floor. And the side section below also shows how we are providing a much wider space between our building and the B Street Flats building than the adjacent building on the other side. So we are providing a step back of the distance between our buildings is between 20 and 40 feet, and on the top floor where we step further back, we have step back or an additional 10-foot step back here. And it's important to note that when you're actually in the B Street Flat apartments, you cannot see the 6th floor as you look out of the bedroom windows because of the way we have modulated the 4th floor corners. And the next slide, I'll have Russ Seaman briefly talk about the streetscape improvements that we're planning with the development of the site and a few more details on the shared green space. Russ, if you could take over and briefly talk about that. While we're waiting, if Russ can't present, I'll just summarize that as well. In terms of streetscape improvements, we are providing wider sidewalks with the additional 6th floor. We need a minimum of 10 foot, and we are providing 12-foot sidewalks on Cannon Street and wider sidewalks on President Street.
Kara.
Oh, sorry, Russ?
Yeah, I think it just took a second for me to get unmuted.
No problem. Go ahead.
All right. Thank you. Again, this is Russ Seaman with Seaman Whiteside. We're handling the landscape architecture and civil engineering for the site. Caro has hit on this pretty well so far, so I'll try and be pretty quick. We're really excited about the pocket park area and the idea of potentially bringing a rain garden into that with a deck that is over that rain garden and some unique seating opportunities, some trees that march through the space, and a lawn area for the users of this project and the B Street Flats to enjoy. We arrived at the forms through the unique angles that were created between these two buildings. That green space spills out to a nice subtly elevated plaza that is on Cannon Street. And, you know, that plaza will be very nice with high-grade pavers used and some steps, seating opportunities. As Caro mentioned, we're widening the sidewalks, 12 feet along Cannon and roughly 10 feet along President Street. They do vary a little bit. There are street tree cutouts that match the existing street tree cutout pattern that's already established on Cannon Street and President Street. I think kind of the key theme here is really trying to create an awesome experience of the public realm. And I think that this raised colonnade area and the plaza area at the corner and how they engage with the wide sidewalk and the street trees is really going to do that and create a nice statement at this corner. Underneath the colonnade area, we're using a specialty paver there as well, and picking up on some of the banding from the architectural columns and carrying that into the paver patterns. And Caro already mentioned the walk that goes from Cannon Street through the Rain Garden and Pocket Park through and hopefully to B Street. So if you can hit the next slide. I don't think we need to dwell on the pool deck too much. I think some planters were added along the front edge since the last time, but most of this is not visible from the public realm. Next slide. This is some of the nice pavers we're using. You know, in the right of way itself, the city requires us to use scored concrete for the sidewalks, but you know, all of these, this colonnade and plaza space that's adjacent to the sidewalks will be using high quality pavers as are illustrated here. There's the red pebble seat. There's some images of that pebble seat. Our thought is to use that on that deck in the Pocket Park space. There's some metal planters that we felt would go nicely along the colonnade area and use the columns on the building to inform the location of those planters. See the angled turf, and we are considering introducing a green wall to the plaza on Cannon Street as kind of a focal feature. And this was a precedent image that we really liked. Next image. This is some of the landscaping, just to kind of show you what we're thinking, but it's, you know, we're thinking of a real contemporary approach with clean hedges, masses of plants, using naturalized and native, and using grasses where we can on the roof. Next image. And I think that goes back to Caro.
Thank you, Russ. We have provided, of course, the building elevation comparisons and the floor plan comparisons, and at the end of this presentation, there are also shadow studies and some sketches of the design process. And I won't go through all of those. We have shown you the renderings that are most efficient, but the streetscape elevations really are interesting. If you look at this slide, how we are transitioning down from, at the very top, from the higher density MUSC district towards Cannon Street and towards the neighborhood. And the next slide shows again the Cannon Street streetscape as you approach from West Ashley. And I won't go through all of those, but I would like to just summarize our design approach and the architectural merit that we are requesting for this building, or the additional 6th floor. If you could go back to page 14, Lauren. So we have shown you that the context it's a transitional context, and we feel that this site should be a gateway building. We have made the adjustments for the board comments from the last time, and we think we addressed those comments. Our 6th floor, we have studied that a lot. We have studied step backs a lot. And we are celebrating it in the center of the building, but we are stepping it back from the right of ways. And it actually covers about 67% of the actual first floor building footprint. So it's not a full sixth floor. But in terms of our contribution to the public realm, I'd like to summarize again what we're doing with this project. First of all, we're converting a gravel parking lot into an attractive new gateway building. We're improving the streetscape and walkability in this area by widening the sidewalks, adding the street trees, and adding street lights. We are introducing this urban feature of the colonnade with high quality material that extends the public realm into the building and creates this semi-public space. We're also elevating the retail to prevent frequent flooding, which the colonnade allows us to do while maintaining ADA access and hiding a ramp within the colonnade. The proposed scope of this project also allows us to bury the unsightly power lines along President Street and Cannon Street at that intersection underground and improve the public realm that way. And as I had mentioned before, we are creating a new pedestrian connection. We're adding the pocket park on Cannon Street. And lastly, we are providing student housing in close proximity to the medical university. This frees up historic housing stock and allows families to move back into this neighborhood. And we feel this will be a great addition to the neighborhood. And with that, I'm open to answer any questions from the board.
Okay, any questions from board or staff?
This is Yulia Sobchuk. I have a very quick and small question. The balconies, are those true balconies? How deep are they?
They are right now shown just as a, I think, 18-inch balcony. So it's more like a balconette or Juliet balcony, but you can open the doors and let the outside flow into the space.
Second question, floor to floor above the first floor, floor to floor height, is it the same?
It is the same as previously, which we need in order to maintain all the required parking on site. It is 20 foot, and we have increased the corners and modulated the corners with elegant brick detailing to basically create a stronger base. So we have lowered that corners that changed the proportions of the colonnade a little bit, and, but the floor to floor height is the same.
Yeah, I'm just referring to the second floor glazing.
The second floor glazing we have increased, so we have three different or two different window proportions here. So on the second floor we have floor to ceiling glazing. It starts at the floor, and on the upper floors we have reduced that glazing. So this is a typical fenestration pattern you see around Charleston, and we introduced that to this project.
Okay, any other questions? If not, we will move on to public comment, starting with the in-person commentary, and then I've got several letters to read in.
Jay, I think we were going to start with the letters and then go to the in-person commentary.
Okay, let me flip over to that. All right, so here we go. There are a number regarding 102 President Street. Thank you for the opportunity to submit our comments. We own property next door. Having reviewed the proposed structure, I am concerned with the following. One, the overall size of the project is simply too overwhelming from this corner. Two, given that most of the neighborhood homes are 1 or 2 stories, I'm concerned about the height. 3, this very large footprint of this project is too large to warrant a 6th floor. 4, I don't understand why the side facing B Street appears to have no setbacks. I'm not sure if that's accurate. It does not match the architecture of the rest of the building. Jeff and Amy Marks, 40 B Street. This from James Lindley on Oakwood Drive. Thank you to the board for considering public comment on this project. I'm a homeowner and board member at 40 B Street Flats. I was among many who voiced a concern for how a large project like this, given the massive footprint and unwarranted height, would be overwhelming for this part of the neighborhood. It would loom over the street, our own condo building, and our single-story and two-story neighbors. Not only this, but the southern elevation that faces B Street has no tiered stepbacks like the other sides. It's simply a straight 6-story wall. Cannon Street's north elevation is not much different, with only a minimal setback. The mass and height of the project remain exactly the same, just with a few changes on President Street to aid in the claim that a 6th floor isn't noticeable. The pictures in the presentation show otherwise, as the 6th floor is very noticeable from all vantage points on the street. Please deny, not defer, this attempt to add a 6th floor. Please defer the project due to its mass and scale. Now, Robert Hager on Paul Revere Drive. My name is Robert Hager, and I'm a lifelong Charlestonian. I bought a condominium at 40 B Street Flats and use it for personal office space. The proposed building for this parcel is extremely massive and completely overwhelms the corner of President and Cannon. Please consider the effect of this building is going to have on the owners of 40 B Street Flats and the overall effect on the adjoining public realm. Many times while building in this beautiful neighborhood, I would frequently hear the word scale and the importance that buildings have on the public realm. So to sum up my comments, the proposed building is totally out of scale. Phyllis Westberg, 40 B Street. I own 121 40 B Street Flats. The proposed 6-story mammoth building dwarfs the neighbors, blocks sunlight, and creates a presence which utterly destroys our neighborhood. Not to mention significant traffic congestion. I strenuously object to its in-your-face proximity to me, its huge 6-story height, and its massive size. Please deny permission for this size building and preserve our residential neighborhood. William Olasov at Arabian Drive. My wife and I own a unit at 40 B Street. The proposed building at 102 President would be a tremendous detriment. 102 President as proposed is just too big for the site and would not fit with the surrounding properties. The size or height and mass and positioning so close to the property line would allow 102 President to loom over 40B, diminishing value and appeal. Luke Fisher, 11 North Road, also an owner at 40B. The height, scale, mass, and close proximity of this project will dwarf our buildings and our neighborhood, and I believe negatively impact the quality of life of our residents. The rezoning from 4 floors, previously allowed, to 5 floors, now allowed, as well as the request for a 6th floor in this current submittals, creates the potential for a project that does not fit the current character of the neighborhood. Kelly Rainwater. We own a unit at 40B and strongly wish any new construction not exceed the scale of the existing structures to maintain the character of the area. Patrick Hill, in regard to the proposed development of 102 President, I'd like to inform the board of my disapproval of this project. Even in a redesigned state, the building is overwhelming. Its size and mass are way off balance with the scale and nature of the existing neighborhood, dwarfing all surrounding buildings. This project isn't in line with what the neighborhood and Charleston are about. Please turn down this request. All right, Sharon Delaney. I'm a resident of 40 B Street. I love my neighborhood. I have been following this project and have a few concerns. One, if they went and got approval for 5-story building, why are they presenting a 6-story building? The 6th story has no architectural merit. 2, is it okay to have the architect that is presenting the project be able? That's not really pertinent. 3, it is a massive structure in my neighborhood. They're pushing for a 6-story for purpose of economics and not architectural merit. Deanne Lucas, as currently designed, this proposed project is too much mass for the block. It would be the largest mass and tallest property on the block. It would set a precedent for any future buildings on the block or the surrounding blocks. I think that if this design looked more residential on the exterior rather than commercial mass, and if it were only 5 stories as previously approved, it would be a better fit for the surrounding Charleston single house property. Ellen Harley on Wentworth Street. 102 President Street, requesting additional height. I write to oppose the addition of height. I'm concerned about the potential adverse impacts of the proposed height and mass for 102 President Street and its adverse impact to the Cannonboro-Elliottboro neighborhood. Please carefully consider these requests and their effects on the future of Charleston's historic districts and vote no on lifting the height limit. Okay. Keshav Kendran, also at B Street. This project will reduce the value of nearby homes. The immense height of the project is the main point of concern, and plans to move forward with the building's 6th floor should be halted for the benefit of local members of the Charleston community. Kathleen Rivers at 20 Atlantic. We continue to cook the goose that laid the golden egg. This was read in for the previous application as well. I urge the BAR to examine extremely carefully any and all proposals that continue to push the boundaries of this city beyond sustainability. I question the mass and population of these projects as well as the height. Dick Downey, I am a member of the Preservation Society of Charleston. I oppose the applications for additional height. There's insufficient showing of architectural merit. The historic nature of the surrounding property should be carefully weighed. Then finally, Allison Owings. The abuse of height restrictions and the sprawling change of Charleston's historic district has to stop. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry, one more. I apologize for that. From Paul Reel, this project remains just as tall with 6 floors. The height will continue to dwarf the neighborhood and street. By not reducing the scale and mass of the building in an impactful way, the developer has not addressed the numerous public concerns over the footprint of the building. Thus, no architectural merit exists for the BAR to approve an additional floor above the building's new 5-story zoning. It is our opinion that the proposed project does not fit into our neighborhood, which is characterized by 1- and 2-story homes, and entirely overwhelms this corner of the community. Oh, there's another one. I'm sorry. I thought I was done. William Westberg. I am amazed and astounded and at a loss to understand why the developer of 103 B Street has not seen fit to modify in any meaningful way his design. First, it was 4 stories, which is enough, then 5 and 6 stories, which is grossly overreaching for a housing neighborhood like ours. Once again, I strenuously object to the height, size, mass, and complete inappropriateness of the proposed structure. Okay, this is from Keith Ward. My wife and I are owners of Tabula Rasa Salon at 125 Cannon. We also own our building and have been in ownership since 2011. Want to write you and express our support of the project at the corner of Cannon and President. This lot has been a bit of an eyesore for quite some time, and we look forward to this project enhancing our neighborhood. Thank you for reading our support and look forward to the future. All right, this is from Melissa Ward. This is the spouse of the previous letter writer. Says basically the same thing. We enjoy having our salon business in downtown Elliottboro, Cannonboro. We support MUSC residential housing project on Cannon and President. I think it will be a nice addition to the neighborhood. All right, that's the total of the written correspondence.
Okay, Jay, the first speaker we have this evening will be Erin Minigan.
Thank you, Erin Minigan, Preservation Society of Charleston. The Preservation Society would like to thank the applicant for meeting with us and walking us through the changes to the design since the previous review. We feel there have been many positive improvements, namely the symmetry of the fenestration is far more successful, the detailing of the brick and the 5th floor treatment is much improved. The colonnade is also moving in the right direction, but we feel the columns should get wider to visually support the building above. Though we do struggle with the height, mass, and architectural direction of this building. This is a sensitive gateway site to the Cannonboro-Elliottboro neighborhood, and we are disappointed to see the design commit to an urban approach rather than relate to the residential context. This building is also put right up to the sidewalk and overwhelms the street corner. We again suggest pushing the building footprint back to be more in line with the neighboring buildings along Cannon Street. We continue to feel the request for a 6th story for architectural merit is inappropriate, and would draw the board's attention to the northeast corner of the building, viewed looking west down Cannon Street on page 21, where the mass and 6-story height of the building is most apparent, protruding beyond the adjacent buildings. We are concerned about the detrimental impacts the 6-story mass will have on the light and air to the neighboring property at this location, and we feel that this area of the building needs further design study. Similarly, we feel the south elevation needs further work, as the 6th floor is not set back and poses too much height and mass as viewed from President Street on page 19. When the height districts were created, this property was envisioned as being most appropriate for a 4-story building, which has already been upzoned to 5 and is now requesting yet another story. The 6th floor is massive and does not contribute to the character of the building. We urge the board to uphold a high standard in reviewing architectural merit, which we would argue does not rise to the level of being awarded in this particular case. Thank you.
Okay, our next speaker is Justin with Historic Charleston Foundation.
This is Justin Schwebler with Historic Charleston Foundation. We would first like to thank the applicants again for continuing their communication with HCF staff throughout the design and review process. They've been very receptive to our comments throughout these meetings. Our primary concern with the current design was the lowering of the brick veneer to the 4th story. We believe that because the 5th story is granted by right of the zoning district, that all 5 stories should be treated as a cohesive design and massing. By reducing the 5th story to a metal panel cladding system and stepping back the floor 16 inches, this actually reduces the overall architectural merit of the structure that is granted by right. Therefore, the primary cornice should be raised above the 5th story, and the exterior should be clad in brick to match the lower levels. As mentioned in our previous comments, we would like to see the brick cladding raised to the 5th story on the south elevation as well, and at least wrap the corners of the east elevation. We believe that the removal of the metal panel sections on the Cannon Street elevation and President Street elevation is a strong improvement, and that the functional balconettes add to the architectural merit of the structure. The 6th story massing of the courtyard elevation needs to have a similar material treatment to the rest of the building. The vertical sections of that elevation should be clad with brick to improve the material palette. We find that the new glazing pattern and enhanced cornice are improvements. However, using a wood soffit under that cornice will cause maintenance issues. We feel that the 6th story is sufficiently hidden from the intersections of Cannon and President Street, and that the 5-story massing is not out of scale for the buildings already on the south side of Cannon Street. If the design improvements listed above are addressed, we could consider the request for a 6th story based on architectural merit. However, at this time, the design needs some refinement to merit an additional floor. We would also like to mention again that this structure would go a long way to pulling the transient student population out of the historic housing fabric of the Cannonboro-Elliottboro neighborhood and make room for reestablishing those properties once again as permanent single-family residences. Thank you.
Let's see, our next speaker is Brent Lindley.
All right, can you hear me?
Yep.
Perfect, thank you. Thanks to all of you guys for staying late and to listen to everyone. I am the Homeowners Association or the regime manager at 40 B Street. We are a condo complex. We're actually always a condo complex. We were never a motel, as architects suggested. Immediately next door to this project, 102 President Street, 84 homes. So when I speak, please hear 84 voices behind me. We've got homeowners who live here. We have some rented to the members of the community. So there are a number of people with opinions on this project. I've actually had 2 pages of prepared comments to make. And now that I have seen and heard the architect's presentation, I'm actually going to shoot from the hip a little bit and walk you through a few things of concern and a few inaccuracies in what was said. Regarding the green space, that is not a public green space. This continues to be said to you. I understand that the 6th floor is needed Merit needs to be there to have a 6th floor. It needs to suit the public, but it is not a public green space. Over half of what they are proposing is on our land. The fence line that they have proposed is moving our fence. We asked them not to present these images to you because they were not accurate. The access is not accurate. And again, they have shown you these images as if they were things to seriously be considered, but that park is not what is being presented to you. That the intention and the conversations we've had is for a private space there, not for the public. In reference to the step backs, the western elevation, the side facing President Street, that's where you've seen all of the progress being made. I would love to show you guys the southern elevation, the elevation that faces the very busy intersection of B and President Street. It's 6 floors, and a comment was made by the board earlier that someone must be mistaken in the fact that that is simply a straight wall there. It is a straight wall there. It's a 6-story wall. The 6th story has 1.5 feet of setback, but the other 5 stories are all a wall. And 18 inches isn't really going to do much in terms of architectural appeal, especially when you're considering going past the original 4-story zoning to give yourself 6 stories. The eastern elevation has not changed since the original proposal. Nothing there has changed. There's a picture, the shadow study in this presentation will give you between 11 a.m. and 2 p.m. To show when sunlight could be there. The concern of the homeowners has never necessarily been that access would be an issue. The issue has been from any of the front doors where you get sunlight. From this green space where you get sunlight, the architect has proposed turf rather than grass, which is a little indicative of what they know the answer to be. You'll also see on the southeast corner where they're building, they have pointed you to, you won't see the 6th floor from 40B Street, but if you look at the southeast corner, they are referring to our 4-story building. If you get to our 5-story building, where the southeast corner overlaps, you will certainly see that. You'll see that from anywhere on B Street. In all of the images that were just shown to you, the only image where you could not see the 6-story is actually, I believe, on the screen right now, when you're immediately in front of the building. You can see the 6-story from any other location. We appreciate what they've been working on. We appreciate all of the various concepts. They have worked on the colonnade. They've worked on what has come from the topic of the glazing. All of that has been very appropriate. But in the overall scheme of what is appropriate in terms of merit, what's appropriate for our neighborhood of 1- and 2-story buildings, that hasn't been addressed. They've given you a checklist of things from the staff and of minor topics, but the big topics of the mass and the scale and the height, all the key words that you keep hearing over and over, those haven't been addressed. Having no step back on one side, and even on the north elevation, only having a minor step back compared to what they keep touting as the western elevation, it's not there. You ask them to look at the height. You ask them to look at the mask and the scale. None of those 3 things have been changed. Nothing has changed. So again, I really do appreciate it. And I want to make sure everyone hears that 40B Street as an organization, you've heard all the voices. We appreciate everything that they've talked to us. They didn't talk to us before resubmitting this to you guys. But I understand what they're going for. We do want something on this lot. We would love for this developer to have the opportunity to put something good on this lot. It just doesn't seem like they have proven a point for a 6th floor, and they haven't heard what you said last time and what the public said last time in reducing these 3 main areas. With all of that said, the point here, 40B Street, would love something to go there. We ask that you deny the 6th floor, not defer it. As we saw in the last ones, kicking the can doesn't help. Giving the architects something to go off of would be great here. If it's not a 6th floor, if it's give them 5 floors and meaningful direction of how to proceed, then that would be fantastic for everyone. But we do ask you to deny the additional floor from the original 4 floors that was intended for, and just to defer until they can work on the scale and the mass of the rest of the project. Thank you guys so much.
Jay, our next speaker is Marion Hawkins. One moment.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and fellow board members. My name is Marion Hawkins. I'm the president of the Cannonboro-Ellerboro Neighborhood Association. We'd like to thank the applicant and the architectural team. They have engaged the Neighborhood Association for the last several months throughout the process. They have presented to the last 3 of our meetings. We appreciate how they have taken our input and improved and revised and improved design from all of our engagements. This building, I will emphasize, as has been said before, is an important gateway into our neighborhood from the west. And it's an incredible improvement over the adjacent buildings, whether it's the MUSC parking garage, the B Street lofts, and especially the B Street lofts, and overcoming a empty parking lot that's been there for many, many years. Just to also address the B Street lofts, we've never had anyone from there be involved in the neighborhood association. All of our residents have been very supportive of this project. This seems to be an isolated investor owners who are adamantly against this project. But also, I just, for the merits, I really feel like we welcome the retail space that they have incorporated into the project, and the additional additional housing for the MUSC students, which will open up a lot of the historical properties around the residential properties will free up housing stock. And so we greatly appreciate that. But I would emphasize that they presented this same proposed design at this past Monday, which was our December meeting, and we've unanimously to approve it. So again, I would like to just say that on behalf of the Neighborhood Association, we appreciate their involvement and engaging us throughout the process, and we have voted to approve and support the project. Thank you.
All right, Jay, our last speaker this evening is Andrew Gould.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yes. Hello, this is Andrew Gould. I've been working closely with the applicant and the Neighborhood Association, helping to refine this and helping to gain the support of the Neighborhood Association, help people understand all of the ways in which this project is beneficial to the neighborhood, which it really very much is. This is this corner needs this so much, this unfortunate intersection, and to have all of this housing and all of this retail, it's going to liven up this corner tremendously, which will have a great effect on the scattered commercial life of that end of Cannon Street. And architecturally, I mean, this is such a great urban building. The C-shaped massing, the height of it, it's really in scale for the big intersection, one of the widest intersections in the city, I think. And it amazes people suggesting that this building is out of scale of its surroundings. Just looking at the aerial view that's on our screen right now, you can see it is very similar in scale to all of the buildings around it. And it's much, much higher quality than all of those buildings. I supported this building last time the board saw it. and I support it far more strongly now. There were some real problems with it before. The corner glazing was quite awkward. The colonnade was awkwardly spaced. I think all of those problems have really been solved with regards to the conceptual massing now. It's a good, honest C-shaped building. It looks confident from all sides. Sure, it has a lot of opportunities for additional detailing, and I'd love to see the balconies, the spandrels, the glazing, you know, achieve some more intricate detailing. You know, I kind of agree with Historic Charleston that it would probably look better if the brick went all the way up to the top of the 5th floor. But these are all things that can be addressed in design development. In terms of conceptual approval, the height, the scale, the mass, this building really has it. It's a good, honest building with a good symmetrical, orderly rhythm about it. And frankly, it's better than what the neighborhood has seen for proposals for large buildings previously. And you know, I really want to talk about how to conceive this question of architectural merit for an additional story. You know, indeed, the ordinance says the best materials, but that has to be understood in a relative sense. I mean, we can't imagine any large commercial building in Charleston is going to be proposed to be built out of precious marble with gilded bronze doors like some imperial palace in Baroque Europe. You know, it's not going to happen. We're not going to see a building made of the best materials. We have to look for buildings that are made of the best materials that we can reasonably expect in this context. And I think we're seeing that here. These materials, this architecture is a lot better than what we realistically see on large buildings proposed for our neighborhood. It's a lot better than the large buildings around it. The MUSC Women's Center, for instance, is a terrible building, terrible construction. The parking garage across the street, just terrible quality construction. And here we have good construction by the standards that are reasonable to expect for a building of this type, a student housing building. So I think it meets the definition of architectural merit by any reasonable contextual standard, and it meets the requirements of it being in context with the surrounding neighborhood by any reasonable standard. If you look at all of the much taller buildings that are all just a block away. So I would really encourage the board to consider that this does meet a reasonable test of that standard, and to consider the fact that, you know, they could achieve just as many apartments if they infilled that courtyard. They have chosen to carve out a large piece of their buildable volume in order to create that courtyard. They don't have to do that. I imagine if they lose the 6th story, they probably will do exactly that. They probably will have to fill in that courtyard in order to build enough apartments. And that would be a real shame, because it would be a worse building without that courtyard, without the C-shaped massing. So I think the fact that they are giving up some space for the public colonnade, giving up some space for the pool courtyard, this is all things that they are doing as a gesture to make it more beautiful from the public realm, and that really needs to be considered as part of the architectural merit that justifies moving some of that built volume up onto the 6th floor, where it's very discreet and is really not a problem at all from the perspective of the neighborhood. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So Linda, I think that's the end of the public comment. Is that correct?
That is end of public comment, Jay.
Okay. Staff comments and recommendations.
Okay, staff. Make sure that I'm unmuted here, and it seems that I am. So comments are divided into 3 parts. General observations, positive design changes, and areas for further study. So with general observations, while similar in footprint and general layout, elements of this project have been studied to visually reduce scale and apparent height. Applicant maintains that this transitional site at the border of medical district and Cannonboro Elliottboro neighborhood calls for a special approach as a gateway building and is requesting an additional floor based on architectural merit and context, which will need to be addressed by the board. B, positive design changes. The first floor base has been made more substantial with a stronger intermediate second floor level cornice and with wider, evenly spaced column and pilasters, establishing a cleaner and more evenly rhythmic colonnade, which has been extended to the south tower and continues visually across the whole of the President Street facade. The very bottom of the building along President in Cannon Streets and at corners now has a limestone base, while maintaining overall massing modulation towards the B Street flats to allow more light and air into a shared pocket park. The primary up cornice has been dropped to fifth floor level with a slightly recessed fifth floor and more deeply recessed and visually minimized sixth floor. The overall effect is a heavier stone and more articulated brick cladding up to the fifth floor level cornice with lighter and cleaner metal panel clad floors above. The floor plans have been redesigned to allow for a more uniform colonnade and visual effect of the translation of the vertical mass to grade, and that is now more successful. The pronounced stairwell at the south has now been fully recessed into the building mass. Green screens have been added below louvers at the south and east elevations to further enhance the pocket park and soften the building space. Applicant has provided adequate justification for additional height based on architectural merit and context. Areas for further study. The first floor base up through the second floor level cornice should be further and enhanced by replacing the brick with a higher quality materials such as limestone to further strengthen the base visually and to heighten the pedestrian experience. So our recommendation is conceptual approval with board and staff comments with approval for an additional story as shown based on architectural merit and context.
Okay, how about a few minutes for an applicant response?
Thank you. Thank you for the wealth of comments from the public and from staff as well. We have created an urban response at that site, and we have shown you in the context that that site can support an urban response and not a smaller scale residential response. We're also understanding that many of the comments that were against the projects are coming from B Street flats. We have from the beginning worked work together with them, and we're continuing that. There are 84 condo owners that it's difficult to reach out to everybody. We have addressed, we feel, the adjacent building with our double step back. We are proposing a shared green space that can be jointly used by both residents. That is not a public portion, but I'd like to also address that the pocket park on Cannon Street, so the portion that is open to the sidewalk at the end of the colonnade, is public. So there is a contribution to the public realm. And we think it is much better to develop the site, not leave it as a gravel parking lot, and improve the security and the walkability in this area than leaving it as it is, which I think a lot of the B Street Flats group owners would prefer. Lastly, I'd like to say that the request for the 6th floor, this additional 6th floor, allows us to make a lot of public contributions to the public realm. And it allows us to use the proposed materials for this building. And there was talk about the 4-story brick expression versus the 5-story brick expression. With our previous design, we have proposed a 5-story brick building with a step-back 6th floor. And we heard the board comments talking about a lighter 5th floor. So with this application, we are responding to board comments that we have heard at the last presentation. And we ask you for conceptual approval. Of course, we will continue to work with staff, with historic groups and neighborhood groups. And we would like to ask for a clear direction from the board that would be most helpful for us. And again, we hope you can support this project and the development of the site. Thank you. Oh, and Josh, sorry, did you want to add anything to those comments?
No, I think you did a great job, Carol. I mean, look, as a investor myself, I understand the concern that investor owners have viewing us as competition. But the reality is these are different products, and property values at 40B will go up, rents will go up, just from the contribution that we provide. So I understand their concern, and Brent is doing a great job of representing his dozen or so investor owners. His fiduciary responsibility is in that realm, and I understand it. But I do think that overall, this is a positive project for everyone involved. And great job, Caro. Thank you.
Okay, board discussion.
Still a tough one.
Yeah, I'll start, Jay. Okay. I think development of this corner is essential for the neighborhood and to create an appropriate transition between the medical district and the neighborhood. At this time, I'm not in support of an additional floor. But I see substantial improvements from the last application to this application. The read I see from the columns into the horizontal masonry band that caps the columns, I like it, and I can get it, but the blending of what's above that to that base is not as clear to me. And because of that, I can't support the additional floor. I want to ask Lawrence if he would go back to the photograph, which was an aerial photo, and it showed kind of this building and the surrounding buildings, but you could also see the medical university in the background. And I don't know what the number was. You know, Carol might be able to tell you quickly, but.
That would probably be the last slide, if you're meaning the aerial with the dropped-in
Yeah.
image.
I
To
was-
zoom out.
No, I mean the real photograph. It was an actual photograph.
Yes.
There was the
Oh.
summary of the architectural merit and context sheet.
Yeah, that was it.
There it is. Okay.
Okay, but, oh, okay, yeah, maybe you were just zoomed in. I thought that was the one that zoomed in more. But when I struggle. Yeah, that's great, right there, perfect. Whether you appreciate the architecture, whether you appreciate the architecture of the medical university, if you look over at those buildings, there's a continuity. I mean, good or bad, but I mean, they blend together. And when we come down and look at the building that we are talking about right now, and we compare it to the parking garage next door, the small building to the left-hand side of the east side, the vacant lot across the street, it's not similar to looking at the medical university complex. Well, of course it's not. I mean, the medical university's got a master plan, and they're following it, good or bad. So we are introducing a new building into this environment, and there are challenges on all sides. So Kara just has it's a difficult situation. The project has to work, which means it has to have enough space in it to rent out, to get the income to pay for it. I mean, I understand that, and it's easy to take a position but based on what point you're viewing this project from. And if you're just to the east of it, there's an eclipse that's happening, and I get that. But I'm not sure that the volume of the build, or I am sure, for me, the size and volume of the building is too great for that environment. And but I also agree that this piece of property, I believe, deserves a substantial structure on it because of its partner on the west side. It's when that parking garage gets torn down, what we see behind it from the medical university will expand this way, and it will maximize that lot. So I'm going to leave it with that. The significant issue for me was the colonnade and the horizontal capping of that colonnade and how that relates to the upper building. I struggle with that a little bit, and so right now I couldn't vote for the top floor.
Leon, thoughts?
You know, this is Leon. I'm somewhat in the same position I was before with again the height. And indeed, James has a point, and it's always good when I have architects that can actually put things out that sometimes I don't necessarily see, and one of those times, and it
well,
does.
wait, Leon, wait a minute. I'm not an architect, so it's not.
Okay.
That's not me. I'm a worker.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Oh, come on, we're not working?
We're working all the time. No, but
Exactly.
it does it. Something Jane said something about, you know, if you were to remove those buildings and you would see those open lots right there. If you were to remove that and you see the open lot to the right of the garage, the building itself that we're discussing it doesn't fit. It just is. It just doesn't fit. And again, this is just my perception of it, and is that if you look, and just everything surrounding it is almost a non-fit. So, and I think the height adds even that additional challenge. So I am also would have a difficult time giving approval on this.
Okay, I guess I'm next. Luda Sobchuk. So, as far as the architecture and from the previous submittal to this submittal, the approaching the facades, approaching the 5th floor, I think it's approaching the colonnade on the 1st floor. All that is actually a really nice approval, and it helps the stepping back 5th floor, changing the material, bringing a little bit more horizontality to this building, so it's not reads as a vertical from the ground as much. So all that is architectural approvals here, but and I tell you the truth, in my mind, this time, I even would not mind 6th floor. Nevertheless, this building fills up almost to the rim, that property, and the space, that light well between the condos and this building is too narrow, too small, and even the steps back of the facades, I don't think they do much of justification to give back light into these units, particularly 1st floor and things like that. So the messing of the overall building is still large and maybe not exactly appropriate for this site. Even so, looking at this photograph with the drawing of the building, and you see the MUSC and garages and all that, so it seems like from aerial is okay, but it's going to be difficult to. It's not palatable from the ground for pedestrian, I think. So I also have an issue with a massing and height of this building right now.
Well, I don't believe I was at the initial meeting. Excuse me. For those board members that were there, do you feel like this application addresses the comments that were included in the previous motion for deferral?
As far as the architecture, yes, but does it mitigate back the 6th floor? Is it helping?
So I believe, Jay, that it moves in the.
To justify 6th floor, I don't think so.
Okay.
So Jay, I intended to clarify this in my comments, but I think there's an improvement in the colonnade and the way the columns actually associate with the horizontal cap. That's great. And I think there are other improvements, but not to a point that would justify the 6th floor for me.
That sounds
No,
sounds
no,
like a
no.
consistent opinion. Yeah, are there specific things that could be done that would meet the intent of the ordinance? Or is it the architectural merit, or is it the context that's standing in the way of the 6th floor here?
So let me ask you this. Carol asked me this at the last meeting. Well, tell us something. Well, I don't feel like it's my job to tell somebody what to do. For me, I hear the conversation about if we have to take a lower floor, then we're going to be infilling where the pool's going to be. Well, the pool's an amenity for the occupants within the building. I think you could make that building rectangle, square, triangle. I think you could do anything you want to do with it. And if it's brilliant, it would be appealing. I think that this building could be designed where it would be deserving of the top floor, right? I mean, it's just that right now the equation for me doesn't work out, and I don't think that it's my responsibility to say why that doesn't work more than what I've said.
We need to clarify about this ordinance. For the ordinance was for 5 floors, and the 6th is 6th floor was approved by height ordinance for the height ordinance.
No, this property was originally in a 4-story height district, and
Yeah,
you
so
could.
they got 5.
That's right. So that's the by right now.
Okay, so the 6th floor is still based on our architectural merits.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Well, I agree to the extent that we're not here to design the proposal for the applicant, and nor are we really here to make their case on their behalf. My read on this is that the concern is as much towards context as it is towards architectural merit. There are some contributions to the public realm with this project. Certainly, that's something that's referenced in the ordinance. Although it's not a simple trade. If you give us this much park, we give you another story. There are other parts of the city that are like that. I think that there's a lot of redeeming qualities to this proposal. Again, I wasn't here last time when it was heard, but this proposal seems like it's got a lot going for it. However, I don't see the context case being built for the additional height. And yes, I recognize that if the project does not receive that additional height, then that might mean a completely different proposal. But that would be the applicant's response. Then that may just be what's necessary.
That's what I was trying to say. You said it maybe better.
I just, one thing I really want us to do, since this is the second time this proposal's been here, and this is a major project, and definitely want to make sure that we're very clear on the direction that we provide. The best part about being chair is you can't make a motion.
Well, again, architecturally, it's a really improved project, so hate to lose it. there's economics involved here with the 6th floor, and that's, if there's a 12 investors in here, that's understandable, but that's not what we have to consider. James, you started this. Could you make a motion?
Yeah, so I will make a motion, but I've got to get clarity on that motion before I make it. But sure, absolutely, I will.
Yeah, you can sketch something out and put it on the table for discussion.
Sure. So I will make a motion for conceptual approval without the additional floor. With staff and board comments included.
Okay, some of those were some of the staff comments were in support of the 6th floor.
Well, and I understand, and I don't have the ability to go back and forth right now on two screens to see the staff comments. And your point's well taken, and that's what I was trying to figure out how to do, and I just don't have access to stuff to do it.
Well, you could just say including staff and board comments, excluding those in support of the 6th floor. It's a little clunky phrasing, but
then that's what I would like to do. And I apologize to all for not having a hard copy here and my inability to go back to with that.
Okay. All right. So we have a motion on the table for conceptual approval. Conceptual approval. I would trying to clarify this here.
Yeah, I don't know.
Conceptual approval, including staff and board comments, excluding those in support of the 6th floor. 6th floor is denied.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So just to read it again, just for clarity, conceptual approval, including staff and board comments, excluding those in support of 6th floor. 6th floor is denied. All right, do we have a second on that?
This is Leon, Scott. I will second.
Okay. We call the roll. Ms. Sobczak, how'd you vote?
Yay in, what is it, approval?
Yay in favor?
Approval.
Okay.
Yes.
Mr. Scott?
Yay in favor.
All right. Mr. Metters?
Yay in favor.
And the chair votes likewise, and motion carries 4-0. Okay. Lawrence, is that the end of our agenda? I believe it is.
It is indeed, and I really appreciate all of your efforts.
Lawrence, we appreciate yours.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Thanks to all.
Yeah,
Thank you.
everyone have a good holiday.
You too. Thank
Yeah.
Happy
And
holidays.
Happy New
everybody.
Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year. Thank you.